police officer notices something strange on a bus. A little girl holding two babies. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. Officer David Harper had learned to trust his instincts over his 15 years in law enforcement. Sometimes it was the smallest things, a flicker of an eye, the stiffening of a shoulder, the way someone hesitated before answering a simple question, that could mean the difference between saving a life and missing a crucial clue. And today, that feeling struck him harder than it had in years. It started the moment he stepped onto bus 42 for a routine patrol check. The downtown route was crowded with the usual morning commuters, office workers staring at their phones, students with headphones, elderly folks with shopping bags. But among the sea of people, David's attention fixed on a man and child at the back of the bus. The girl couldn't have been older than 8, small and barely visible beneath an oversized hoodie. Her blonde hair was tangled and dull, lacking the shine of a well-cared-for child. But it was what she held that made David's pulse quicken. 2 infants, one cradled in each arm, bundled in mismatched blankets. The man beside her had a thin, wiry frame and kept his hood pulled low despite the warm California spring. His knee bounced in agitation, fingers clenching and unclenching at his side. His eyes darted around the bus, never settling on one spot for too long. "Next stop, Market Street," the driver announced as David made his way slowly down the aisle, pretending to scan the faces of passengers while keeping the trio in his peripheral vision. The man tensed as David approached, his hand moving protectively, no, possessively, to the girl's shoulder. The girl flinched at his touch, a small, involuntary movement that spoke volumes. When David was a few feet away, the girl lifted her head slightly. Her eyes, blue and wide with fear, met his for just a split second. In that moment, her lips moved, forming 3 words so softly he almost missed them. "Help us, please." David's blood ran cold as the pieces clicked into place. That morning's briefing had included an Amber Alert, an 8-year-old girl and twin infants, abducted from their foster home in Sacramento. The description matched perfectly. The girl with blonde hair, the twins, 1 boy and 1 girl only 3 months old. The man must have seen the recognition in David's eyes, because his posture shifted instantly from nervous to dangerous. His hand moved toward his jacket, and David knew with absolute certainty that whatever was hidden there wasn't going to be used to keep the peace. David Harper had faced down armed suspects before, but never in a bus packed with civilians. Never, with 3 children caught in the middle. He kept his face neutral, his posture relaxed even as his mind raced through every possible scenario. "Warm day to be wearing a hoodie," David said conversationally, stopping at their row. His right hand rested casually near his holster, hidden from the man's view by his body position. "Mind if I sit here?" The man's eyes narrowed, a cornered animal calculating its chances. "Seats taken," he replied, voice rough with tension. David smiled, the practiced smile of an officer who had talked down countless agitated individuals. "Just need to check something. Won't take but a minute." The little girl hadn't moved, her gaze now fixed firmly on the twins in her arms. One of the babies stirred, making a soft mewling sound. She instinctively rocked them, the movement so practiced it seemed she had been caring for them far longer than the 2 days since the abduction. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step off the bus with me for a moment," David said, his tone shifting, ever so slightly from friendly to authoritative. The man's knee stopped bouncing. Stillness settled over him like a shroud. The dangerous calm before violence erupts. "I don't think so, officer." A woman sitting across the aisle looked up from her phone, sensing the growing tension. Other passengers began to take notice, the atmosphere in the bus shifting as conversations quieted. "It's standard procedure," David continued, maintaining eye contact with the man. He tapped his radio twice, a predetermined signal to dispatch that he needed backup immediately. "Just need to ask you a few questions." "We're late," the man replied, his hand inching closer to whatever was concealed in his jacket. "The kids need to get home." David's mind flashed to the Amber Alert details. The foster mother found unconscious, the back door broken in, the children's beds empty. The report mentioned only one kidnapper, but that didn't mean there weren't others involved. "What's your name, sweetheart?" David asked the girl, deliberately ignoring the man for a moment. Before she could answer, the man's grip tightened on her shoulder. "She doesn't talk to strangers," he snapped. "Family rule." David nodded slowly. "Smart rule. My name's Officer Harper. David Harper. Now I'm not a stranger anymore." He crouched down to the girl's eye level. "What's your name?" The bus lurched to a stop, the doors hissing open at Market Street. Several passengers stood to exit, creating momentary confusion. The man seized the opportunity, shoving David hard and grabbing for the girl's arm. "Run," he barked at her, but the girl couldn't move quickly with both babies in her arms. David recovered his balance instantly, years of training kicking in. He lunged forward, grabbing the man's wrist just as his hand emerged from his jacket, clutching a switchblade. "Everyone down!" David shouted, twisting the man's arm behind his back with one fluid motion. The knife clattered to the floor as passengers screamed and scrambled for the exits. The bus driver hit the emergency button, automatically locking the doors and alerting dispatch. The girl had pressed herself against the window, curling protectively around the infants, her small body trembling. "You have no idea what you're doing," the man hissed, struggling against David's grip. "You're making a huge mistake. Sir, you're under arrest for child abduction and assault on a police officer," David replied, managing to secure one of the man's wrists with his handcuffs despite the continued resistance. "You have the right to remain silent." As he recited the Miranda rights, David heard the blessed sound of sirens approaching. Backup was arriving, but the man's desperation was escalating. "They'll find them," the man spat, his eyes wild now. "No matter where you take those kids, they'll find them. They always do." The words sent an involuntary chill down David's spine. Just then, the radio at his shoulder crackled to life. "Officer Harper, this is Lieutenant Reynolds. We've secured the perimeter. FBI is en route." "Roger that," David responded, relief flooding through him. "One suspect in custody. Children appear unharmed but will need medical evaluation." As additional officers boarded the bus and took control of the suspect, David turned his attention to the girl. She hadn't moved from her spot, still clutching the babies as if they might disappear if she loosened her grip. "Hey there," he said, softly, keeping a respectful distance. "You're safe now. My name's David. Can you tell me yours?" Her eyes darted to where the officers were escorting the handcuffed man off the bus, making sure he was truly gone before she spoke. "Emily," she whispered, her voice rough from disuse. "Their names are Adam and Alice." David nodded, offering a gentle smile. "Emily, Adam, and Alice. Those are beautiful names. You've been very brave, Emily. The babies look like they're doing okay because of you." Emily's shoulders relaxed slightly, the first sign that she might be willing to trust him. "He said if I let anyone take them, bad things would happen." "Nothing bad is going to happen to you or the babies," David promised. "We're going to take you somewhere safe, get you checked out by doctors to make sure you're all healthy." A female officer approached slowly, introducing herself as Officer Martinez. "Hi, Emily. Would it be okay if I help you with one of the babies? That way you can walk more easily." Emily hesitated, her arms tightening around the infants. "They stay with me," she insisted, her voice suddenly firmer despite its softness. "I promised I'd protect them." "And you've done an amazing job," David assured her. "But we're here to help you now. You don't have to do it all alone anymore." A sleek black SUV pulled up alongside the bus, and a woman in a dark suit stepped out. David recognized the stance immediately. FBI. She flashed her credentials as she boarded the bus, her sharp eyes taking in the scene in seconds. "Agent Sarah Lawson, FBI," she introduced herself briskly. "I've been tracking this case since the Amber Alert was issued." Her gaze softened slightly as it landed on Emily and the twins. "Good work, Officer Harper." "They need medical attention," David said. "Emily here has been very protective of the babies. Agent Lawson crouched down to Emily's level, her voice becoming gentler. "Emily, I'm Sarah. I'm here to help keep you and the babies safe. We have a special doctor waiting to make sure Adam and Alice are okay. Would that be all right?" Emily studied Agent Lawson's face carefully, then looked back at David as if seeking confirmation. He nodded encouragingly. "They put something inside Adam," Emily suddenly whispered, her voice barely audible. "I heard them talking. They said he's carrying something important." David and Agent Lawson exchanged alarmed glances. "What do you mean, Emily?" Sarah asked carefully. "Who put something inside Adam?" Emily's eyes welled with tears. "The doctors in the White Room. They said Adam and Alice are special. That's why they keep finding us, no matter where we hide." Before either of them could ask another question, one of the babies, Adam, began to cry, a high, distressed wail that sent Emily into immediate action, rocking and shushing him with practiced movements. "We need to get them to the hospital now," Agent Lawson said with newfound urgency. "I'll escort them personally." As they carefully guided Emily off the bus, David glanced at the man now secured in the back of a patrol car. The suspect was watching them intently, his expression not of defeat but of grim satisfaction, as if everything was proceeding exactly according to plan. Outside, more FBI agents had arrived, establishing a secure perimeter around the scene. David helped Emily into the back of a medical transport while Agent Lawson conferred with her team in hushed, urgent tones. "I'll ride with them to the hospital," David told his lieutenant. He couldn't explain why, but something told him his involvement in this case was far from over. The little girl's words kept echoing in his mind. They put something inside Adam. As the doors closed and the vehicle pulled away, Emily finally allowed Officer Martinez to hold Alice while she cradled Adam closer. The infant had quieted, but Emily's vigilance hadn't diminished. She looked up at David with eyes too old for her young face. "They're going to come for us again," she said with absolute certainty. "They always do." The children's ward at San Francisco Memorial Hospital had been transformed into a fortress. FBI agents stood at every entrance, checking credentials and turning away curious hospital staff. Inside a private suite, medical personnel moved with quiet efficiency around Emily and the twins. David Harper stood in the corner, watching as a pediatrician gently examined Alice while a nurse took her vitals. Emily sat rigidly on the edge of a nearby bed, her eyes never leaving the babies. She had allowed the doctors to examine them only after Agent Lawson promised they would remain in the same room together. "Everything looks good with Alice," Dr. Marshall announced, wrapping the infant in a fresh blanket. "She's slightly underweight, but otherwise healthy." "Now let's have a look at Adam," he said, approaching Emily, who still held the baby boy protectively. Emily's grip tightened momentarily before she reluctantly handed him over. "Be careful," she whispered. "They did something to him." Dr. Marshall nodded seriously, respecting her concern rather than dismissing it as childish imagination. As he unwrapped the baby and began his examination, his expression shifted subtly. David watched as the doctor's hands paused over Adam's abdomen, his brow furrowing. "Could we get an ultrasound in here, please?" Dr. Marshall requested, his voice deliberately calm. Agent Lawson moved closer. "What is it, doctor?" "There's a recent surgical scar on his abdomen, very small, professionally done." He pointed to a thin red line, barely visible against the baby's skin. "This incision was made within the last week, but it's healing remarkably. Well, almost too well for an infant this age." Emily nodded. "I told you. They put something inside him." A nurse wheeled in an ultrasound machine. David watched as the doctor applied gel to Adam's stomach and began moving the wand over the scar. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to the monitor. "That." Dr. Marshall frowned, adjusting the equipment. "That shouldn't be there." The screen showed a small, dark object nestled against the baby's liver. A perfect circle. Too regular to be natural. Too deliberate to be a mistake. "What is that?" David asked, moving closer. "I'm not sure," Dr. Marshall replied, taking screenshots of the image. "But it's definitely foreign to the body, metallic based on the density. It looks manufactured." Agent Lawson was already on her phone. I need a surgical team and security clearance for operating room 3. And get me someone from the technology division. Emily reached for Adam, her small hands trembling. They said he was carrying something precious. That's why they want him back. So badly, David knelt beside her. Emily, who are they? Who did this to Adam? She shook her head, eyes downcast. I don't know their names. There were lots of people in the White Room. Scientists, they said. They talked about experiments and tracking and how Adam and Alice were perfect because they're twins. And how did you end up with them? Agent Lawson asked gently. Emily's voice dropped even lower. I was already there. In a different room. They've had me since I was little. I don't remember anything before the facility. She looked up, her blue eyes swimming with tears. But I heard them planning to move the babies. They said they needed to test the tracking device, so I took them. I knew it was wrong to steal, but they wouldn't stop crying and no one was being nice to them. David felt his heart constrict. This wasn't just an abduction case anymore, it was something far darker. You did the right thing, Emily, he assured her. You protected them when no one else would. A commotion in the hallway drew their attention. David moved to the door, peering through the small window. A group of men in dark suits were arguing with the FBI agents posted outside. We have federal clearance, one of them was saying, flashing credentials. This is a matter of national security. Agent Lawson joined David at the door, her expression hardening. Department of Defense, she muttered. How did they get here so quickly? The device? David suggested. If it's some kind of tracker. The lead man outside spotted them through the window. His face remained impassive, but there was something cold in his eyes that made David instinctively move to block the door more completely. Emily, Sarah said without turning from the window, did you ever hear anyone mention the Department of Defense or the military? Emily clutched Adam tighter as a nurse handed Alice back to her. The man in the gray suit. Everyone was afraid of him. He came to check on the babies every week. The group outside was growing more insistent. One of them, a tall man with a military bearing, stepped forward. Agent Lawson, I'm Colonel Richard Grant. We need to debrief the girl and take custody of the infants immediately. Sarah's posture stiffened. With all due respect, Colonel, these children were abducted and are now in protective custody. One of them has an unidentified foreign object surgically implanted inside him. Until we determine what that is and who's responsible, they're staying under FBI protection. The colonel's expression darkened. That information is classified, Agent Lawson. Those children are part of a sanctioned research program. Your interference is jeopardizing national security. Sanctioned by whom? David cut in, unable to contain his outrage. What kind of research involves implanting devices in babies? Colonel Grant ignored him, focusing solely on Agent Lawson. Agent, you're out of your depth. I have orders signed by the Director of National Intelligence. Stand down. Sarah didn't flinch. I'll need to verify those orders with my superiors. Until then, no one accesses these children without proper medical authorization. The standoff continued for several tense moments before the colonel finally took a step back. You have 1 hour, Agent Lawson. Then I'm coming back with an extraction team. As the men retreated down the hallway, David turned to Sarah. You don't believe that research program nonsense, do you? Not for a second, she replied grimly. No legitimate government program implants tracking devices in infants and keeps children like Emily as prisoners. A soft beeping sound suddenly emanated from the ultrasound machine which had been left running. Dr. Marshall frowned, adjusting the controls. That's not coming from the machine, he said slowly. It's coming from the device inside Adam. The beeping accelerated, growing more insistent. On the screen, the small circular object appeared to be pulsing. It's activated, Emily whispered, her face pale with terror. That means they're coming. The ones even the man in the gray suit is afraid of. David and Sarah exchanged alarmed looks as the beeping continued to increase in frequency and volume. Whatever had been put inside Adam wasn't just a tracking device, it was a beacon. And now it was calling to someone. Or something. We need to move them, David said urgently. Right now. As if in response, the hospital lights flickered once, twice, then plunged the room into darkness. In the sudden darkness, David's hand went instinctively to his weapon. The emergency backup lights flickered on, casting everything in an eerie red glow. Adam's implant continued its rhythmic beeping, faster now, more urgent. "Secure the children," Sarah ordered, drawing her service weapon. She tossed David a spare, comm unit. "Channel 3. My team is patched in." Dr. Marshall grabbed a portable ultrasound. "We need to monitor that device. If it's transmitting, we might be able to block the signal." Emily clutched the twins tighter. "No," she whispered. "Well, blocking makes it worse. They'll know." The fear in her voice chilled David to the core. He keyed the comm. "Officer Harper to all units. Implement full lockdown procedures. Unknown hostiles potentially inbound." Sarah barked additional orders into her comm while checking the hallway. "East stairwell is clear. We can get to the ambulance bay." "They won't be using the stairs," Emily said with absolute certainty. "They never do." "Who doesn't?" David asked, wrapping a protective arm around him. Emily's shoulders. Before she could answer, the hospital's PA system crackled. Instead of an announcement, a high-pitched tone echoed through the building, the same frequency as Adam's device. The ultrasound monitor flickered, then displayed a rapid stream of code before going dark. Dr. Marshall stared at it in disbelief. "That's impossible. It just uploaded something." A new sound joined the chaos, the rhythmic thud of helicopter rotors directly above the hospital. "Roof access," Sarah realized. "They're coming from above." David scooped up Alice while Emily held Adam. "Secondary exit through radiology. Now." They hurried into the corridor, Sarah taking point, David guarding the rear. Hospital staff rushed, in all directions responding to the unexpected lockdown. As they rounded the corner toward radiology, David spotted them. 3 figures in tactical gear emerging from the elevator. Their movements were synchronized, almost mechanically precise. "Contact!" he shouted, pulling Emily behind a supply cart. Sarah fired 2 warning shots, causing hospital personnel to scatter. The figures didn't flinch. They didn't take cover. They simply adjusted their trajectory and continued advancing. "Body armor," Sarah muttered, aiming for their legs instead. The shots connected, but the figures didn't slow. One raised an arm, revealing a device unlike any weapon David had seen. "Down!" Sarah yelled, diving toward David and Emily just as a pulse of energy shot through the space where they'd been standing. Medical equipment sparked and smoked in its wake. The figures advanced relentlessly. "Service elevator." Dr. Marshall pointed to a door marked, "Staff only." "It leads directly to the loading dock." They changed course, hurrying toward the new escape route. Sarah's comm unit buzzed with static, then cleared. "Lawson," a voice barked. "What's your situation?" "Director Hayes," she responded, relief evident in her voice. "We're at San Francisco Memorial with the children from the Amber Alert. DoD personnel tried to intervene. Now unknown hostiles with advanced tech are—" "Stand down, Agent Lawson," the director interrupted. "Hand over the children to Colonel Grant, that's an order." Sarah froze mid-stride, her expression hardening. "Sir, with respect, these children have been experimented on. One has an implanted device transmitting to unknown receivers. That information is classified. Your involvement ends now." Sarah looked at Emily's terrified face, then at the infants. She made her decision. "I can't comply with that order, sir." She switched off the comm and turned to David. "Looks like I'm officially rogue. You should walk away now. Save your career." David didn't hesitate. "Those figures aren't stopping, and neither am I." They reached the service elevator, Dr. Marshall swiping his ID card. The doors slid open, revealing a small industrial lift. As they entered, Adam's beeping suddenly stopped. In the abrupt silence, Emily looked down at the baby boy, her face draining of color. "It's transmitting the coordinates," she whispered. "They know exactly where we are now." The elevator doors closed just as the figures rounded the corner, their expressionless faces visible for the first time. David caught a glimpse of eyes that reflected the emergency lights in a way that human eyes shouldn't. The descent began, taking them down toward the loading dock and an uncertain escape. The service elevator descended with agonizing slowness, the mechanical grinding of cables filling the small space. David cradled Alice against his chest, acutely aware of how fragile she felt in his arms. The baby girl was eerily quiet, as if sensing the danger surrounding them. Emily pressed herself into the corner, her body curled protectively around Adam. The device inside him had gone silent, but its presence loomed larger than ever in their minds. Sarah stood with her weapon drawn, facing the doors, ready for whatever might be waiting when they opened. Those weren't regular tactical teams, David said quietly. The way they moved, their eyes. Sarah nodded without turning. I've encountered a lot of specialized units in my career. Never anything like that. They're not people, Emily whispered. Not anymore. The adults exchanged concerned glances over her head. Dr. Marshall looked skeptical, but kept his doubts to himself. The fear in Emily's voice was too genuine to dismiss. What do you mean, sweetheart? David asked gently. Emily's eyes remained fixed on Adam as she spoke. That's why the babies are so important. They're trying to make more of them. Better ones. She finally looked up, her gaze haunted. I heard the scientists talking. They called them augments. They used to be soldiers. The elevator lurched to a stop. Sarah tensed, positioning herself to shield the others. Stay behind me, she ordered. As the doors began to slide open, the loading dock was dimly lit and appeared deserted. Large delivery trucks were parked in their bays, their rear doors sealed. Stacks of supplies lined the concrete walls. Sarah scanned the area before cautiously stepping out. Gun raised. Clear for now, she said. But we need to move quickly. Where's your car, Dr. Marshall? Staff parking east side, he replied, pointing toward a heavy metal door across the dock. But they'll be watching all hospital exits. Then we don't use a hospital exit, David said, noticing a delivery truck with its engine idling. We hitch a ride. Before they could move toward the truck, the sound of the service elevator activating again stopped them in their tracks. Someone was coming down. Run, Sarah commanded, already moving toward the idling truck. They sprinted across the loading dock, their footsteps echoing on the concrete. Dr. Marshall reached the truck first, yanking open the passenger door to find a startled delivery driver staring back at him. FBI, Sarah barked, flashing her credentials with her free hand. We're commandeering this vehicle, national security. The driver, a middle-aged man with a salt and pepper beard, gaped at them. What the? No time to explain, David cut in. Sir, I'm Officer Harper, SFPD. We need your help. There are children in danger. Something in David's tone or the sight of the infants must have convinced him. The driver nodded, sliding over to make room. Get in. Behind them, the elevator doors opened. 3 more of the strange figures emerged, moving with that same unnerving precision. One of them spotted the group by the truck and raised its arm-mounted device. Down, Sarah shouted, pushing Dr. Marshall into the cab while returning fire. Her bullets seemed to have little effect, but one lucky shot hit something on the lead figure's equipment. Sparks erupted from its arm device, momentarily distracting it. David handed Alice to Emily, who was already climbing into the truck with Adam. Get them secure. Turning back, he drew his own weapon and fired at the overhead sprinkler system. Water cascaded down, drenching the loading dock and, more importantly, the electrical equipment of their pursuers. 2 of the figures' devices sparked violently, momentarily disrupting their advance. Go! David shouted, leaping into the truck beside Emily and the babies. Sarah jumped in last, slamming the door behind her. Drive, she ordered the bewildered delivery man. As fast as you can. The driver didn't need to be told twice. He floored the accelerator and the truck shot forward, crashing through the security barrier and onto the street. What the hell is going on? The driver demanded, swerving around a slow-moving sedan. Who are those guys back there? The less you know, the safer you'll be, Sarah replied, keeping her eyes on the side mirror. Turn right at the next intersection, then get on the freeway heading south. Emily had gone completely silent, her small body trembling as she held the twins. David wrapped his arm around her shoulders, trying to provide some comfort. "You're doing great, Emily," he assured her. "You're keeping Adam and Alice safe, just like you promised." She looked up at him, her blue eyes wide with fear and exhaustion. "You don't understand. It doesn't matter where we go. As long as Adam has that thing inside him, they'll find us." Dr. Marshall had been checking the babies, ensuring they were unharmed from the chaotic escape. "The device seems stable for now. No more transmissions that I can detect. But we need specialized equipment to safely remove it." "I know someone," Sarah said, her expression grim. "An ex-military surgeon who works off the grid, helped extract tracking implants from deep cover operatives. If anyone can remove that thing safely, it's her." "How far?" David asked. "About 2 hours south. Remote property in the hills near Santa Cruz." The driver cleared his throat nervously. "Look, I want to help, but I've got deliveries to make, and my boss will—" Sarah cut him off. "Sir, what's your name?" "Mike. Mike Donovan." "Well, Mike, right now you're involved in protecting witnesses in a federal investigation. I promise you'll be compensated for your time and trouble, and I'll personally speak with your employer." Mike nodded reluctantly, his knuckles white on the steering wheel as he merged onto the freeway. "Those guys back there, they weren't normal, were they?" "No," David said quietly. "They weren't." The truck maintained a steady pace southbound, putting distance between them and the hospital. For the moment, they seemed to have escaped, but David couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Emily had fallen into an exhausted sleep, still holding the babies close. David carefully adjusted a blanket around them, struck by how young she truly was. A child forced to grow up too quickly, carrying burdens no child should bear. "What have you gotten yourself into, Lawson?" Sarah muttered, checking her phone. "Director Hayes has already issued a warrant for my arrest. Obstruction of justice, interference with a classified operation." "You did the right thing," David assured her. "Whatever's going on here, those children deserve protection, not to be treated like lab experiments." Sarah's expression softened slightly as she looked at the sleeping children. "My whole career down the drain." "Maybe not," Dr. Marshall interjected. "If we can extract that device and analyze it, prove there's illegal experimentation happening." "These people have high-level clearance," Sarah replied. "They'll bury any evidence before we can use it." David thought for a moment. "Unless we go public, make it too big to cover up." "That's a dangerous game," Sarah warned. "These people don't play by normal rules." "Neither do we," David responded, his determination growing. "Not anymore." As they continued south, the urban landscape gradually gave way to rolling hills. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the highway. In the distance, dark clouds were gathering, promising a storm by nightfall. Mike navigated the truck, with the skill of someone who had spent decades on the road. "So these kids," he ventured cautiously, "they in some kind of trouble?" David exchanged glances with Sarah before answering. "They were taken from people who were hurting them. We're trying to get them somewhere safe." Mike nodded, seemingly satisfied with the simplified explanation. "My sister works with foster kids, seen too many little ones who've been through hell." He glanced at the sleeping Emily and the twins. "Whatever you folks are doing, I'm in, for as long as you need me." "Thank you," Sarah said sincerely. "We could use the help." As they approached the outskirts of Santa Cruz, Sarah directed Mike to exit the freeway and take a winding road into the hills. The truck groaned as it climbed the increasingly steep terrain. "Almost there," Sarah said, checking her phone's GPS. "Just a few more miles." Emily stirred awake, immediately checking the babies. "Adam's getting hot," she said worriedly, touching his forehead. "It happens when the device is working." Dr. Marshall quickly examined the infant. His temperature is elevated, pulses faster than it should be. David felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. "Is it transmitting again?" "I don't think so," Emily replied, her small face creased with concentration. "It feels different this time, like it's changing." The road narrowed further, dense forest pressing in on both sides. The truck's headlights cut through the gathering darkness, illuminating the rough path ahead. There, Sarah pointed to a nearly invisible turnoff. That driveway leads to Dr. Abernathy's compound. Mike carefully maneuvered the truck onto the narrow driveway. Gravel crunched beneath the tires as they wound deeper into the woods. After about half a mile, a small clearing appeared, revealing a sprawling, single-story building partially built into the hillside. Solar panels covered much of the roof, and a state-of-the-art security fence surrounded the property. As they pulled up to the gate, a voice crackled through an intercom. "Identify yourself." "Sarah Lawson. Eleanor is expecting me." A camera swiveled to scan the truck and its occupants. There was a long pause before the voice returned. "Park in the garage to your right. Come inside quickly." The gate slid open and Mike guided the truck into a large garage built into the side of the hill. The door closed automatically behind them, sealing them in. A woman emerged from a side. Dowser, tall with steel gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her face was lined with age and experience, but her movements were precise and energetic. She wore scrubs and a white lab coat. "Lawson," she greeted Sarah with a curt nod. "You've brought me trouble again." "Hello to you too, Eleanor," Sarah replied. "We need your help." Dr. Eleanor Abernathy's sharp eyes took in the group, lingering on Emily and the twins. When she saw Adam, something flickered across her face. Recognition, followed quickly by alarm. "Bring them inside," she said urgently. "Quickly now." As they entered the facility, Adam began to cry, a high, distressed wail unlike any normal infant. His small body went rigid in Emily's arms. Dr. Abernathy rushed forward, taking the baby and quickly placing him on an examination table in what appeared to be a fully equipped medical suite. "How long has he been like this?" she demanded, already attaching monitoring equipment. "It started about 30 minutes ago," Dr. Marshall replied. "Temperature elevation, increased heart rate." Dr. Abernathy pulled up Adam's shirt, revealing the small surgical scar. She ran a specialized scanner over it, her expression growing darker by the second. "This isn't just a tracking device," she said finally, looking up at them with grave concern. "It's reconfiguring itself. And if I'm right about what it's becoming, we have far bigger problems than being found." The monitor beside Adam began to beep rapidly as his vital signs spiked. Outside, thunder rumbled as the storm clouds finally released their rain, pelting the compound with heavy droplets. Emily moved to Adam's side, placing her small hand on his. "It's starting," she whispered. "The next phase." Dr. Eleanor Abernathy's medical suite was a stark contrast to the hospital they had fled. Where the hospital had been sterile, white, and institutional, this space blended cutting-edge technology with comfortable practicality. Medical monitors with readings David didn't recognize lined one wall, while another held what appeared to be military-grade communications equipment. "This facility is electromagnetically shielded," Dr. Abernathy explained as she worked over Adam, her movements quick and precise. "Whatever signal that device is trying to send won't penetrate these walls." Sarah positioned herself near the entrance, gun still drawn. "How long will that hold?" "That depends entirely on what we're dealing with," Eleanor replied, her attention fixed on the scanner in her hand. The device emitted a soft blue glow as she passed it over Adam's abdomen. "This isn't like any implant I've seen before, and I've extracted dozens from operatives all over the world." Emily hadn't left Adam's side, her small hand resting on his. Alice, now in David's arms, began to fuss as if sensing her twin's distress. "You know more than you're saying," David said to Eleanor, gently rocking Alice. "About what this thing is." The older woman's shoulders tensed slightly. "I have suspicions, none of them good." She turned to Emily. "Child, you said this is the next phase. What does that mean?" Emily's eyes remained fixed on Adam. "They talked about stages. Integration, calibration, activation." Her voice grew softer. "Adam and Alice were special because they're twins, perfect matches. One to carry, one to control." Dr. Marshall, who had been examining the medical equipment with professional interest, turned sharply at this. "Control? As in remote control?" Emily nodded. Adam carries it. Alice tells it what to do. She looked up at the adults, her eyes haunted. They're connected. That's why they always need to be together. Eleanor's scanner beeped, displaying a complex three-dimensional image of the device inside Adam. She zoomed in, her expression turning. Grim. It's not just reconfiguring, she said. It's growing, integrating with his tissue. David felt his blood run cold. Can you remove it? Not without killing him, Eleanor replied bluntly. At least not with conventional methods. It's sending microscopic tendrils into his nervous system. Mike, who had been silently observing from near the door, paled visibly. What kind of sick bastards put something like that in a baby? The kind who think the ends justify any means, Sarah said bitterly. Eleanor turned to Sarah. You need to tell me exactly who's after these children. What branch, what clearance level, what project name? I need to know what we're up against. Sarah hesitated. DoD personnel tried to take custody at the hospital, led by a Colonel Richard Grant. They claimed the children were part of a sanctioned research program. But the team that attacked us afterward, they weren't standard military. Richard Grant, Eleanor repeated, her expression darkening. He was involved with Project Nexus. Project Nexus? David asked. Eleanor didn't immediately answer. Instead, she moved to a locked cabinet, entering a complex code before retrieving a metal case. Inside was a syringe filled with amber liquid. This is a neural stabilizer of my own design, she explained, preparing Adam's skin for injection. It won't remove the device, but it should temporarily halt its progression and stabilize his vital signs. What is Project Nexus? David pressed as Eleanor administered the injection to Adam. The doctor sighed heavily. About 15 years ago, DARPA began exploring ways to enhance soldiers' capabilities beyond the limits of conventional training. Neural implants, genetic modification, advanced prosthetics. Most of it was theoretical, ethical concerns keeping it in check. She glanced at Emily. Or so we thought. You were involved, Sarah realized. Eleanor nodded reluctantly. I helped develop early prototypes of neural interfaces. I left when they started pushing for human trials before we'd resolved the side effects. She looked at Adam, whose breathing was gradually becoming more regular. I never imagined they'd progress to experimenting on children. The stabilizer seemed to be working. Adam's vital signs were normalizing, and the device's activity, visible on Eleanor's scanner, was slowing. Why children? Dr. Marshall asked, voicing the question they were all thinking. Neural plasticity, Eleanor replied. Adult brains resist artificial integration. Children's brains adapt, grow around the technology. And infants. She trailed off, the implication clear. And twins? David prompted. The perfect control group. Identical genetic material, allowing them to isolate the variables affected by the technology. Eleanor turned to Emily. How long have you been with them? Emily's brow furrowed in concentration. I don't remember anything before the facility. They said I was special too. A prototype. Eleanor's expression softened with genuine sympathy. How old are you, child? 8, I think, maybe 9. They celebrate my birthday in spring. The room fell silent as they absorbed the implications. This child had spent her entire life as a test subject. Those things at the hospital, David Ow said finally. Emily called them augments. Former soldiers? Eleanor nodded grimly. The early test subjects. The neural interface was supposed to enhance reaction time, strength, sensory processing, but it had side effects. It stripped away emotion, individuality, eventually even the sense of self. They became extensions of the system rather than users of it. And that's what they want to turn these babies into? Mike asked, his voice rising with indignation. Programmable soldiers? I think their ambitions go far beyond soldiers, Eleanor replied, checking Adam's vitals again. The twins represent something new, something that solved the problems with the original augments. Adam stirred, making a soft cooing sound. His color was returning to normal and the fever seemed to be breaking. Emily sagged with visible relief. The stabilizer is working, Eleanor confirmed, but it's temporary. We need a more permanent solution before the device reactivates. Outside, the storm intensified, rain lashing against the windows. The remote location that had seemed like a sanctuary now felt isolating, vulnerable. They'll find us eventually, Emily said softly. The shields won't stop them forever. Nothing does. Sarah checked her phone, which showed no signal. My bureau. Contacts are compromised. Director Hayes is working with them, which means we can't trust anyone in federal law enforcement. I have colleagues, Dr. Marshall offered. Other physicians who would be horrified by what's happening to these children. We could reach out and put them in danger too, Sarah interrupted. These people don't hesitate to eliminate obstacles. We need concrete evidence before we go public. Eleanor moved to one of her computers, typing rapidly. I might be able to help with that. If I can interface with the device, get a digital signature, we could trace it back to its source, prove who created it and who authorized its use. Is that safe for Adam? David asked. Safer than leaving it to continue its integration, Eleanor replied. But I'll need specialized equipment that I don't have here. Where do we get it? Sarah asked. Eleanor hesitated. There's a research facility in Palo Alto. Privately funded, no government ties. They're developing medical applications for neural interfaces, legitimate ones, meant to help people with spinal injuries. After what happened at the hospital will be all over the news, David pointed out. Every law enforcement agency in the state will be looking for us. Not to mention those augment things, Mike added. Eleanor walked to a closet and pulled out several sets of scrubs. You'll go in disguised as medical personnel transporting a patient, Adam. I'll make the call. Tell them I'm sending over a special case for their equipment. They'll just agree to that? Sarah asked skeptically. The director owes me her career, Eleanor replied with a thin smile. And her daughter's life. She won't ask too many questions. As they discussed the plan, David noticed Emily sitting very still, her eyes closed, one hand on Adam and the other on Alice, who had finally settled in a portable crib. Emily? He asked gently. Are you okay? She opened her eyes slowly. They're talking to each other, she whispered. The babies, not with words, but I can feel it. She looked up at David. Alice is protecting Adam, somehow. David exchanged concerned glances with Eleanor, who moved closer to examine both twins. Remarkable, she murmured after a moment. Their brainwave patterns are synchronizing. I've never seen anything like it. Is it dangerous? David asked. On the contrary, Eleanor replied. It appears to be helping stabilize the device. The connection between them is acting as a regulating mechanism. Sarah, who had been monitoring the security feed, suddenly stiffened. We've got movement on the perimeter, half a mile out and closing. Eleanor hurried to her computer, pulling up an external camera feed. Through the driving rain, dark figures could be seen moving through the trees with that same mechanical precision they'd witnessed at the hospital. How did they find us? Dr. Marshall asked, his voice rising in panic. The truck, Mike realized. They must have tracked the truck. Sarah was already moving, gathering essential supplies. We need to leave now. The back exit, Eleanor directed, rapidly shutting down equipment. There's a service tunnel that leads to a garage on the other side of the hill. I keep emergency vehicles there. David carefully lifted Adam, who remained stable but drowsy from the stabilizer. Emily immediately took Alice from the crib, falling, into step beside him. What about the equipment you need? David asked Eleanor. We'll have to improvise, she replied, grabbing a medical bag and stuffing it with supplies. The facility in Palo Alto is still our best option if we can reach it. The security monitors showed the augments advancing steadily despite the storm, their movements unnaturally fluid as they navigated the difficult terrain. They're not slowing down, Sarah observed, helping Mike gather the remaining supplies. We have maybe 5 minutes before they reach the perimeter fence. This way, Eleanor led them through a hidden door in the back of the medical suite, revealing a narrow corridor that sloped downward into the hillside. Emergency lights cast an amber glow along the path. As they hurried through the tunnel, David could feel Adam stirring against his chest. The baby opened his eyes, staring up at David with an intensity that seemed impossible for an infant. For a brief, disorienting moment, David had the distinct impression that Adam was fully aware, not with the limited consciousness of a baby, but with something deeper, more knowing. The sensation passed as quickly as it had come, leaving David shaken. He glanced at Emily, who was watching him with a knowing expression. "You felt it too," she said simply. "That's how they communicate." Before David could respond, a muffled explosion echoed from behind them. The tunnel lights flickered momentarily. "They've breached the perimeter," Eleanor said grimly, increasing her pace. "The main house security protocols will slow them down, but not for long." The tunnel opened into a small underground garage housing 2 vehicles, a rugged-looking SUV and a modified ambulance. "Take the ambulance," Eleanor instructed, moving to a security panel to unlock the garage door. "It's got medical equipment on board and full electromagnetic shielding. I've modified it for situations exactly like this." "You're not coming with us?" David asked in surprise. Eleanor shook her head. "Someone needs to stay behind. Trigger the facility's self-destruct protocols. Can't let them get access to my research." She handed Sarah a small device that looked like a sophisticated GPS. "This will lead you to my contact in Palo Alto, Dr. Maya Chen. Tell her Ellie sent you and it's a Blackbird scenario." Sarah took the device, her expression grim. "They'll kill you if they find you here." A thin smile crossed Eleanor's face. "Bold of you to assume I'd let them find me alive." She reached into her lab coat and pulled out a military-grade sidearm. "I wasn't always a doctor, Agent Lawson." Another explosion, closer this time, shook dust from the tunnel ceiling. "Go," Eleanor urged. "I'll give you as much time as I can." Chapter 7. The specialized ambulance tore through the storm-lashed mountain roads, its headlights cutting through sheets of rain. Sarah drove with grim determination, her trained hands steady on the wheel despite the treacherous conditions. In the back, David sat with Emily and the twins while Dr. Marshall monitored Adam's vitals on the advanced medical equipment Eleanor had installed. "His readings are holding stable," Dr. Marshall reported. "Whatever Dr. Abernathy gave him is still working." Mike sat in the passenger seat beside Sarah, his eyes constantly checking the side mirrors. "No sign of pursuit yet." "Don't get comfortable," Sarah replied, taking a sharp turn that sent them all grabbing for handholds. "Those things don't give up." David checked his phone again. Still no signal. The storm was interfering with reception, or perhaps they were still within range of whatever jamming technology their pursuers were using. Either way, they remained cut off from any potential allies. Emily hadn't spoken since they'd left Eleanor's compound. She sat perfectly still, one hand on Alice's carrier, her eyes distant as if listening to something only she could hear. "Emily?" David said gently. "Are you doing okay?" She blinked, focusing on him slowly. "Dr. Abernathy is gone," she whispered. The adults exchanged alarmed glances. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" David asked, though a sinking feeling in his gut told him he already knew. "I felt it," Emily replied. "Like a door closing. She made sure they couldn't follow us." Sarah's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "How would you know that, Emily?" "The same way I know Adam is fighting the thing inside him right now," she answered simply. "The same way I know Alice is helping him." Her gaze met David's. "I'm connected too. That's why I could take care of them. That's why they let me near the babies." Dr. Marshall frowned, scientific skepticism warring with what he'd witnessed over the past several hours. "Are you saying you have some kind of telepathic connection with the twins?" Emily shook her head. "Not telepathic. The doctors called it neural resonance. They put something in me too, a long time ago. A receiver, not a transmitter." She touched the back of her neck. "Right here." David felt a chill that had nothing to do with the storm raging outside. "Can you sense the people pursuing us? The augments?" "Sometimes," Emily admitted. "But it hurts to try. Their signals are wrong, broken." Sarah checked the GPS device Eleanor had given them. "We're about 40 minutes from Palo Alto, assuming the roads stay passable." As if in direct challenge to her words, they rounded a bend to find a massive tree had fallen across the road, its ancient trunk blocking their path. Entirely. Damn it! Sarah slammed on the brakes, bringing the ambulance to a skidding halt mere feet from the obstacle. Mike was already unbuckling his seatbelt. I'll check if we can get around it. Wait. Sarah grabbed his arm. Something's not right. Her trained eyes scanned the shadowy forest on either side of the road. This is too convenient. David felt it too. That prickling sensation at the back of his neck that had saved his life more than once on patrol. It's an ambush, he said with certainty. As if summoned by his words, high beam lights suddenly blazed from the trees on both sides of the road, blinding in their intensity. The ambulance was caught in a crossfire of illumination, exposed and vulnerable. Reverse! David shouted. Get us out of here! Sarah was already shifting gears when the first impact hit. Something slammed into the side of the ambulance with enough force to rock it on its suspension. Emily screamed, clutching the babies closer. What the hell was that? Mike gasped. Before anyone could answer, another impact struck from the opposite side. Through the strobing effect of the high beams, David caught glimpses of dark figures moving, with inhuman speed around the vehicle. They're trying to get in, Sarah said, her voice tight as she threw the ambulance into reverse. The tires spun in the mud before catching, and they began to back away from the fallen tree. A deafening crack split the air as something punched through the reinforced windshield, spiderwebbing the glass but not breaking through completely. Sarah swerved, nearly sending them into a ditch. The shielding, Emily cried. It's protecting us. They can't scan through it. David drew his service weapon, knowing it would do little good against these attackers, but unwilling to remain defenseless. Sarah, we need options. There's a forestry service road about half a mile back, she replied, eyes fixed on the rearview mirror as she continued their retreat. It's rough terrain, but it connects to Route 17 eventually. Another impact, this time on the roof. Metal groaned as something began to pry at the seams of the vehicle. Dr. Marshall grabbed a portable defibrillator from the medical supplies. The electrical discharge might disrupt them, he suggested, powering up the device. If they have neural implants, a strong enough shock could overload their systems. It was a desperate plan, but they had few alternatives. David nodded, positioning himself near the rear doors, which were rattling under repeated blows. When I say now, hit the doors with everything that thing's got, he instructed Marshall. The ambulance lurched as Sarah navigated the treacherous road in reverse. Rain pounded the vehicle, turning the windows into streaming curtains of water that further reduced visibility. A metal screech announced the rear doors beginning to give way. David raised his weapon, aiming at the widening gap. Now, he shouted. Doctor. Marshall lunged forward, pressing the charged defibrillator paddles against the metal doors just as dark, gloved fingers pried into the opening. A blue flash of electricity arced through the rain, accompanied by an inhuman shriek that sent chills down David's spine. The fingers disappeared, and for a moment, the assault on the ambulance paused. It worked, Mike exclaimed. Sarah didn't slow down. Not for long. We need to find that service road. Emily, who had been huddled protectively over the babies, suddenly straightened. Wait. I can feel them regrouping. They're changing tactics. As if to confirm her warning, a new sound cut through the storm, the rhythmic thudding of helicopter rotors. They called in air support, Sarah said grimly. We can't outrun that. David's mind raced through their dwindling options. The ambulance's shielding protected them from being scanned, but it also made them a conspicuous target. The only vehicle on this remote road, unable to blend in or disappear. We need to split up, he said, the decision crystallizing even as he spoke it. They're tracking the babies, but they can't pinpoint which one has the device if we're separated. Sarah caught his eye in the rearview mirror. You're suggesting we divide their forces. David nodded. You take Adam and Emily in the ambulance. Continue to Palo Alto. The shielding should keep his signal contained. Dr. Marshall, Mike, and I will take Alice and go another way. Create a diversion. No, Emily protested, her small face fierce with determination. The babies need to stay together. Alice helps Adam fight the device. Dr. Marshall frowned. She's right about their connection. Adam's vitals have been more stable with his sister nearby. Separating them could accelerate the device's integration. The helicopter was getting closer, its searchlight sweeping the road ahead. "We don't have a choice," David insisted. "If we stay together, they'll capture all of us." Sarah spotted the turnoff for the service road and wrenched the wheel, sending the ambulance bouncing onto the rough track. "There's another option," she said. "We all abandon the ambulance. Make them think we're still inside it." It was risky, but David saw the logic immediately. "We set it to continue on autopilot while we slip away on foot. There's an old ranger station about 2 miles through these woods," Sarah said, bringing the ambulance to a stop in a dense copse of trees that provided some cover from aerial spotting. "We can take shelter there until the storm passes, then continue to Palo Alto by alternate means." They worked quickly, gathering only the essential medical equipment and supplies they could carry. Sarah programmed the ambulance's autopilot, another of Eleanor's modifications, to continue along the service road at a steady pace. "Ready?" she asked, her hand on the driver's door. David secured Alice in a makeshift carrier against his chest, while Dr. Marshall did the same with Adam. Emily stood between them, her small face set in grim determination despite her obvious exhaustion. "Stay close," David told her softly. "We'll get through this together." With a final nod, Sarah opened her door, and they slipped out into the raging storm, leaving the ambulance to continue its journey as a decoy. The forest swallowed them immediately, dark and dense, offering concealment, but also new dangers. Above them, the helicopter continued its search pattern, its spotlight passing over their positions seconds after. They'd moved beneath the canopy of trees. For now, at least, they had evaded detection. But as they began their difficult trek through the rain-soaked wilderness, David couldn't shake the feeling that they were merely delaying the inevitable. Whoever, or whatever, was hunting them had resources, technology, and determination beyond anything he'd encountered in 15 years of law enforcement. And at the center of it all were 3 children, bearing secrets inside them that powerful people would kill to possess. The storm raged on, a relentless downpour that transformed the forest floor into a treacherous maze of mud and hidden obstacles. David led the way, Alice secured against his chest, his free hand often reaching back to steady Emily as she navigated the difficult terrain. Despite her exhaustion, the child moved with surprising determination, her eyes constantly darting between the babies as if monitoring their invisible connection. Behind them, Dr. Marshall carried Adam with Sarah and Mike forming a protective rear guard. They moved as silently as possible, the roar of the storm masking their progress from the helicopter that still circled in widening patterns above the forest. "The ranger station should be just beyond that ridge," Sarah said during a brief pause, consulting a small compass. Water streamed down her face, her FBI windbreaker long since soaked through. "We need to hurry," Dr. Marshall urged, concern etching his features. "Adam's temperature is rising again. The stabilizer is wearing off faster than Dr. Abernathy predicted." David glanced at Emily, who nodded solemnly, confirming the doctor's assessment without words. Her connection to the twins had proven invaluable, offering insights that even the medical equipment couldn't detect. "Almost there," David assured them, adjusting Alice, who remarkably remained calm despite the chaos around her. Just a little further. They pressed on, climbing the gentle slope of the ridge. The trees thinned slightly at the top, momentarily exposing them to the searchlight of the helicopter as it swept past. They froze, pressing themselves against rain-slick trunks, barely daring to breathe until the light moved on. "They haven't given up on the ambulance yet," Mike observed. "Your decoy plan is working." "For now," Sarah replied grimly. "But they'll figure it out eventually." The descent down the other side of the ridge was more treacherous, the soil looser and prone to small slides. David led carefully, testing each step before committing his weight. About halfway down, the first glimpse of their destination appeared. Through the trees, a small weathered cabin with dark windows nestled in a protected hollow. "There it is," Sarah confirmed. "Forest Service emergency shelter. Should have basic supplies, maybe a radio." They approached cautiously, with Sarah moving ahead to check for any signs of danger. After a careful reconnaissance, she signaled the all clear, and they made their final approach through the thinning rain. The cabin was simple but solid, a single room with basic furnishings, emergency supplies stacked neatly along one wall. Most importantly, it was dry and defensible, with shuttered windows and a sturdy door that Mike immediately barricaded after they entered. "Generators here," Sarah announced, locating a small propane model in a weather-protected alcove outside. Within minutes, she had it running, providing them with light and the ability to operate the basic medical equipment they'd carried from the ambulance. Dr. Marshall immediately set up a makeshift medical station, connecting Adam to a portable monitor. "His vitals are definitely destabilizing," he reported, his expression grave. "Body temperature 101.2 and rising. Heart rate elevated." Emily sat beside Adam, her small hand resting on his chest. "The device is fighting back," she said softly. "It doesn't like being slowed down." David laid Alice in an improvised crib made from a storage container lined with emergency blankets. The baby girl seemed to sense her twin's distress, her previously calm demeanor giving way to restless movements. "Is there anything we can do?" David asked Dr. Marshall. "Without Dr. Abernathy's neural stabilizer, we're limited," he admitted. "I can try a fever reducer, but I'm not sure it will help with something like this." Mike, who had been inventorying the cabin's supplies, approached with several bottles of water and some emergency ration bars. "At least we won't starve or dehydrate while we figure this out," he offered, trying to inject a note of optimism. Sarah had positioned herself by the window, keeping watch while staying in regular contact with their surroundings. "Helicopters moved off," she reported, "but that doesn't mean they've given up. They might be regrouping, changing tactics." "How long until dawn?" David asked. "About 4 hours," Sarah replied. "We should use that time to rest and plan our next move. Getting to Palo Alto in this weather, off-road with 2 infants and a child." She left the challenges unspoken. A soft whimper from Adam drew their attention. The baby's face was flushed, his tiny body rigid with discomfort. Emily leaned closer, whispering something too quiet for the adults to hear. Remarkably, Adam seemed to relax slightly at her words. "What did you tell him?" David asked gently. Emily looked up, her blue eyes reflecting wisdom far beyond her years. "That Alice and I are still here, that he's not alone." Dr. Marshall administered a pediatric dose of fever reducer, carefully monitoring its effect. "This is the best I can do without specialized equipment," he said apologetically. "We need to get him to Dr. Chen in Palo Alto as soon as possible." Mike had been examining a dusty map of the region pinned to the cabin wall. "There's a small airfield about 10 miles from here," he pointed out. "If we could get there, maybe find a pilot." "Too risky," Sarah countered. "Commercial flights would be tracked immediately, and private pilots ask questions." "What about a train?" David suggested. "The coastal line runs through the valley below us. If we could make it to a station." Sarah considered this. "Less obvious than trying for an airport. We could separate, take different cars, meet at the Palo Alto station." As they discussed options, Emily's head suddenly snapped up, her entire body going rigid. "They're coming," she whispered. The adults fell silent, straining to hear over the diminishing storm. At first there was nothing, then a faint mechanical hum, different from the helicopter, more like drones, Sarah hissed, moving to extinguish the lights. Everyone down, away from the windows. They barely had time to comply before a small fleet of aerial drones swept overhead, their red indicator lights visible through cracks in the shutters. Unlike commercial models, these moved with military precision, scanning patterns that methodically covered the forest below. "They're searching in a grid," Sarah observed. "Standard search and rescue pattern, but automated." "Can they detect us in here?" Mike asked, his voice hushed. "Depends on their sensors," Sarah replied. "Thermal imaging would pick up our heat signatures, but this cabin has tinfoil emergency blankets. We could line the walls, create a barrier." They worked quickly in the darkness, using the survival blankets to create a makeshift shield against thermal detection. All the while, Adam's condition continued to worsen, his temperature climbing despite the medication. 2-4, Dr. Marshall. reported grimly. Whatever that device is doing, it's accelerating. Emily hadn't left Adam's side, her face a mask of concentration. He's fighting it, she insisted, but it's getting stronger. David knelt beside her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. Emily, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me, he said softly. Did you ever hear anyone talk about a kill switch for these devices? Any way to deactivate them? Emily's brow furrowed in thought. They had a special room, she said slowly, with machines that could turn things on and off, but they never used it on us, only on the augments when they misbehaved. A control center, Sarah murmured. Makes sense they'd have remote access to the implants. Did you ever hear where this room was? David pressed gently. Emily shook her head. But it wasn't at our facility. The doctors would talk to someone else, someone far away when they needed to use it. A centralized control system, likely at a more secure location. It was little help to them now, but the information might prove valuable if they survived long enough to expose the operation. Outside, the drones continued their sweep, moving in ever-tightening circles around their position. It was only a matter of time before they were discovered, regardless of their precautions. We need a distraction, Sarah decided. Something to draw them away from the cabin. Mike nodded thoughtfully. I might have an idea. He rummaged through the emergency supplies until he found a flare gun with several cartridges. If I can get far enough away and set this off, it might pull their attention in another direction. Too dangerous, David objected. You'd be exposing yourself. Got a better plan? Mike challenged, already shrugging into his still damp jacket. Besides, I wasn't always a delivery driver. 2 tours in Afghanistan taught me a thing or two about evasion tactics. Sarah studied him with newfound respect. You sure about this? Mike's weathered face broke into a grim smile. Those kids deserve a chance, and my delivery route will still be there tomorrow, if we make it that far. They couldn't afford to waste time arguing. Sarah quickly outlined a plan. Mike would create a diversion to the north while they prepared to move south toward the railroad tracks. If all went well, they would rendezvous at a predetermined point before dawn. Be careful, David told Mike as the older man prepared to slip out. These aren't normal adversaries. Noted, Mike replied with a wry smile. You keep those little ones safe. I'll see you at the rendezvous point. With that, he slipped out into the night, moving with a stealth that confirmed his military background. They waited in tense silence, counting the minutes until they heard it. A flare screaming into the sky nearly a mile away, its brilliant red light briefly turning night to day. Almost immediately, the drone formation shifted, converging on the new point of interest. Now's our chance, Sarah urged. We need to move while they're distracted. They gathered their supplies quickly, with Dr. Marshall focusing on the medical equipment essential for Adam's survival. David secured Alice against his chest again, while Sarah helped Emily into a rain poncho that was comically oversized on her small frame. Stay close to me, David told Emily, taking her hand. No matter what happens, don't let go. As they prepared to leave, Adam suddenly let out a cry different from any they'd heard before. Not pain or discomfort, but almost a warning. At the same moment, Emily gasped, her fingers tightening around David's. They know, she whispered. The drones were a trick. They wanted us to move. Before anyone could respond, a blinding light flooded the cabin as the door burst open. Silhouetted against the glare were the unmistakable forms of the augments, their movements precise and coordinated as they entered. David reacted instinctively, placing himself between the intruders and the children. Sarah drew her weapon, but before she could fire, one of the augments raised a device that emitted a high-pitched pulse. Sarah's gun flew from her hand as if pulled by an invisible force, clattering uselessly to the floor. Federal agents, a flat mechanical voice announced. The children are now in protective custody. Resistance will be met with appropriate force. Dr. Marshall stepped forward, desperation overriding caution. This baby needs immediate medical attention. Whatever you've put inside him is killing him. The lead augment tilted its head, an eerily inhuman gesture. The asset is functioning as designed. Step away from the subject. Asset? Dr. Marshall's face contorted with outrage. He's a 3-month-old baby. The augment didn't respond, instead moving forward with inexorable purpose. 2 others flanked it, their movements perfectly synchronized. David knew they were outmatched. These weren't men they could reason with or overpower. Whatever humanity they once possessed had been stripped away, leaving only machines in human form. But as the augments advanced, something unexpected happened. Alice, still secured against David's chest, began to emit a series of sounds, not cries, but something closer to the tonal patterns of speech. At the same moment, Adam went completely still in Dr. Marshall's arms, his fever-flushed face suddenly serene. The augments froze mid-step, their synchronized movements faltering for the first time. The lead figure's head jerked in an unnatural motion, as if fighting against an invisible restraint. System. Interference, it stated, its mechanized voice distorting. Unexpected. Signal pattern. Emily's eyes widened in realization. Alice is talking to them, she whispered to David. She's confusing their signals. Sarah didn't waste the opportunity. She dove for her weapon, rolling to her feet with practiced efficiency and firing 3 rapid shots at the cabin's roof. The rotten timbers gave way immediately, sending a cascade of debris down upon the augments. "Run!" she shouted, already moving toward the back window. They burst out into the night, the sounds of pursuit close behind them. The forest was darker now, the storm having passed, but thick clouds still obscuring the moon. They ran blindly, guided only by Sarah's sense of direction and the desperate knowledge that stopping meant capture. Or worse. The terrain grew steeper as they descended toward the valley, loose stones and slick mud making each step treacherous. Behind them, inhuman sounds echoed through the trees as the augments recovered and gave chase. The babies. Emily gasped between labored breaths. They're fighting back. Together. David didn't understand how infants barely 3 months old could be fighting back against technology designed by the most advanced military minds in the country. But after everything he'd witnessed, he was past the point of disbelief. "Keep going," he encouraged Emily, supporting her as they navigated a particularly steep section. "We're almost to the valley floor." In the distance, the mournful horn of a freight train echoed through the night, their potential salvation if they could reach the tracks in time. But the sounds of pursuit were growing closer, the augments moving through the difficult terrain with uncanny speed and precision. They weren't going to make it, David realized with sinking certainty. Not all of them. Someone would have to stay behind, create another diversion, give the others a chance to reach the train. As if reading his thoughts, Sarah fell back to his side. "I'll hold them off," she said quietly, her expression leaving no room for argument. "Get the children to Palo Alto. Find Dr. Chen. Expose all of this." "Sarah," David began to protest. "That's an order, Officer Harper." She cut him off, her voice firm but her eyes betraying the fear beneath her professional exterior. "Make it count." Before he could argue further, Sarah veered off, heading back up the slope toward their pursuers, her weapon at the ready. David wanted to stop her, to insist they stay together, but he knew she was right. The children had to be the priority. "This way," he urged Emily and Dr. Marshall, guiding them toward the sound of the approaching train. "We need to reach those tracks." As they pushed forward, David caught one last glimpse of Sarah Lawson, standing tall against the night, facing the inhuman forces that pursued them with unwavering courage. Then the forest closed between them, and she was gone. The sound of gunfire echoed through the trees behind them, punctuated by strange electronic wails that sent chills down David's spine. But he couldn't look back now. Sarah had given them a chance, and he wouldn't waste it. The tree line finally broke, revealing the railroad tracks cutting through the valley below. And there, moving at a steady pace, was their salvation. A long freight train heading south toward San Jose and, beyond that, Palo Alto. We'll only get one chance at this, David told Dr. Marshall and Emily as they rushed toward the tracks. Are you ready? In his arms, Alice had gone eerily quiet, as if conserving her energy for whatever lay ahead. Adam, too, seemed suddenly calm, his fever apparently receding as rapidly as it had appeared. Emily looked up at David, her young face set with determination despite the exhaustion and fear she must have been feeling. We're ready, she answered for all of them. As the train approached, its rhythmic rumbling drowning out the sounds of conflict behind them, David made a silent promise to Sarah, to Eleanor, and to Mike, wherever he was. He would get these children to safety. He would expose the people who had turned them into experiments. He would make sure their sacrifices weren't in vain. Behind them, the forest had gone ominously silent. The gunfire had stopped. Whether that meant Sarah had escaped or been captured or worse, David couldn't know. But now, as the freight train drew alongside them, moving slowly up a gentle grade, he could only focus on what lay ahead. Now, he shouted, and they began their desperate sprint alongside the train, reaching for handholds on a series of boxcars rumbling past in the darkness. The rhythmic clacking of steel wheels against tracks had a hypnotic quality, almost soothing after the chaos they'd left behind. David sat with his back against the wall of the boxcar, Alice sleeping peacefully in his arms. Morning light filtered through the partially open door, illuminating dust particles that danced in the air with each gentle sway of the train. Emily had finally succumbed to exhaustion, curled up on a bed of empty burlap sacks they'd found in the corner of the car. Even in sleep, her small hand remained stretched out toward Adam, maintaining that mysterious connection she'd described. Doctor Marshall checked Adam's vitals again with the portable monitor they'd managed to keep during their frantic escape. Temperature's normal, he reported, genuine bewilderment in his voice. Heart rate stable, I can't explain it. Alice, David said simply, looking down at the infant girl in his arms. Emily said they're connected, that Alice helps Adam fight the device. Dr. Marshall's scientific skepticism warred visibly with what he'd witnessed. It defies everything I know about neurology, about infant development. They shouldn't be capable of this level of communication, David supplied. Connection? Any of it, Marshall admitted. And yet? He gestured helplessly at the monitor, displaying Adam's stable readings. David's thoughts drifted to Sarah, to the sound of gunfire that had abruptly ceased in the forest. Had she escaped? Been captured? Or had those inhuman augments? He pushed the thought away. Sarah Lawson had struck him as a survivor from the moment they'd met. He had to believe she'd found a way out. How much longer until we reach Palo Alto? He asked, changing the subject. Marshall checked his watch. Assuming this train maintains its current speed and doesn't make any unexpected stops, perhaps 2 hours. 2 hours. It seemed like an eternity and no time at all. They had no way of knowing if their pursuers had tracked them to the train, or if they were still focused on the forest where Sarah had made her stand. We need a plan for when we arrive, David said, thinking aloud. We can't just walk into a research facility with 2 infants and expect to be welcomed with open arms, even with Eleanor's connection. Especially not after what happened at the hospital, Marshall agreed. By now, every law enforcement agency in California will be looking for us. David's mind raced through possibilities. They needed transportation, disguises, a way to contact Dr. Chen without exposing themselves. Emily stirred, her eyes fluttering open. For a moment, she seemed disoriented. Then memory flooded back and she sat up with alarming suddenness. Sarah? She asked, looking around the boxcar. David shook his head gently. She stayed behind to give us a chance to escape. We don't know what happened to her after that. Emily's face fell, but she nodded with that same unnerving maturity. She knew what she was doing. How are you feeling? Marshall asked her, offering a bottle of water. Emily took a small sip before answering. Better. The babies are. Quieter now. She looked at Alice, then Adam. They're conserving energy. For what? David couldn't help asking. Emily shrugged slightly. I don't know exactly, but something important is coming. I can feel it. The ominous words hung in the air, adding to the tension already strung tight. Between them, a sudden decrease in the train's speed drew their attention. Marshall moved cautiously to the partially open door, peering out. We're approaching a station, he reported. Small town, can't make out the name. We should get ready to move if necessary, David decided. If they stop long enough, we might need to change trains or find another mode of transportation. They gathered their meager supplies, preparing for a quick exit if needed. The train continued to slow, eventually coming to a complete stop alongside a small, deserted platform. Marshall peered out again. Station sign says Morgan Hill. We're still about 25 miles from San Jose. Any sign of authorities? David asked. None, that I can see. Just a couple of railroad workers. They waited tensely as minutes ticked by. The train didn't immediately resume its journey, suggesting either a scheduled stop or some kind of delay. I'm going to check what's happening, Marshall volunteered. I'll be less recognizable than you with the babies. David nodded reluctantly. Be careful, don't draw attention. Marshall slipped out of the boxcar on the side away from the platform, disappearing from view. David moved to the door, positioning himself to keep watch while remaining hidden in the shadows. The small station was indeed largely deserted, with only a few workers visible on the platform and no obvious law enforcement presence. Perhaps their luck was holding, at least for the moment. Emily joined him at the door, her face solemn. There's something wrong with this place, she whispered. David looked down at her in concern. What do you mean? It feels empty. Like it's pretending to be normal, but it's not. David scanned the station again with renewed attention. At first glance, everything seemed ordinary. The workers in their uniforms, the quiet platform, the small ticket office with its closed windows. But as he continued to observe, he noticed small discrepancies. The workers moved with a certain precision, their movements lacking the casual randomness of normal people going about their jobs. They didn't chat, didn't check their phones, didn't display any of the 100 little human behaviors one would expect. You're right, he murmured, his hand instinctively moving to where his service weapon would normally be. Only to remember, it had been lost during their flight through the forest. Something's off. As if confirming their suspicions, one of the workers suddenly looked directly at their boxcar, his movements too deliberate to be coincidental. Though distant, David could see the man's eyes, flat, emotionless, with that same unnatural quality they'd observed in the augments. We need to move, David said urgently. Now. But before they could retreat from the door, a figure appeared beneath their boxcar, Dr. Marshall, returning with surprising speed. We have to go, he hissed, climbing back inside. They're here. The augments? David asked, already gathering Alice more securely. Marshall nodded grimly. Disguised as railroad personnel. I overheard two of them talking. They've blocked the tracks ahead and behind. They're going to search the train car by car. How did they find us? David wondered aloud, though he already suspected the answer. Adam's device, Emily said softly. It must have started transmitting again. Marshall checked the monitor. His vitals are still stable. If the device is active, it's not affecting him the same way it did before. We need another exit strategy, David said, mentally cataloging their increasingly limited options. Any ideas? Marshall's expression was grim. There's a maintenance road that runs parallel to the tracks. I saw a utility vehicle parked about 100 yards from here. If we could reach it. David peered out again. The disguised augments were now systematically moving along the train, starting from the engine at the front. They had perhaps 3 minutes before they reached their boxcar. We'll have to risk it, he decided. Emily, can you run? The girl nodded determinedly. I can keep up. Dr. Marshall, you take Adam, I'll carry Alice. Emily stays between us. We move fast, stay low, and head straight for that utility vehicle. And if we encounter resistance? Marshall asked. David had no good answer for that. Without weapons, facing enemies that bullets barely slowed, Their options for fighting back were virtually non-existent. "We improvise," he said finally. They positioned themselves at the door, waiting for the right moment. The augments were methodically checking each car, their movements unhurried but relentless. When they were approximately 5 cars away, David gave the signal. Now. They dropped from the boxcar on the side opposite the platform, immediately crouching low to use the train itself as cover. David led the way, one arm securely holding Alice, the other guiding Emily by the shoulder. Marshall followed closely, with Adam, the medical monitor hastily stuffed into his pocket. They moved as quickly as caution allowed, using the train as a shield while they paralleled its length toward the utility vehicle Marshall had spotted. Each step carried them further from the augments searching the cars, but also closer to the moment when their absence would be discovered. The utility vehicle, a rugged ATV with a small cargo bed, came into view, parked casually beside a maintenance shed as if waiting specifically for them. It seemed too convenient, almost like a trap, but they had precious few alternatives. Almost there, David encouraged Emily, who was keeping pace admirably despite her exhaustion. Just a little further. They had nearly reached the ATV when a shout from behind confirmed their escape had been discovered. David didn't look back, focusing entirely on their destination. They reached the vehicle in seconds, Marshall immediately checking for keys while David scanned for immediate threats. "Keys are in it," Marshall reported with disbelief. "Too convenient," David muttered, but they couldn't afford to question their good fortune now. "Get in, all of you." Marshall climbed into the driver's seat with Adam, while Emily squeezed into the middle. David handed Alice to her before taking the passenger position, his eyes constantly scanning for danger. The engine roared to life on the first try. Behind them, figures were already emerging from between the train cars, moving with that unnerving mechanical precision that marked them as augments. "Go," David urged, and Marshall complied, sending the ATV lurching forward onto the maintenance road that paralleled the tracks. The small vehicle accelerated rapidly, kicking up dust as they fled the station. "They'll pursue us," Marshall shouted over the engine noise, "and this thing can't outrun whatever vehicles they have." "We don't need to outrun them," David replied. "We just need to reach somewhere public, somewhere with witnesses. These augments may be powerful, but they still seem to avoid exposing themselves openly." Marshall nodded in understanding, pushing the ATV to its limits as they sped away from the train station. Emily sat between them, her arms wrapped protectively around Alice while keeping constant visual contact with Adam in Marshall's grasp. The maintenance road eventually connected with a more substantial service road, which in turn led them toward what appeared to be a small town in the near distance, likely the residential area of Morgan Hill. "Head for the town center," David directed. "Somewhere busy, with people around." As they approached the outskirts of town, the first signs of normal life appeared. Houses with cars in driveways, a school with children in the playground, ordinary people going about their day completely unaware of the extraordinary pursuit happening in their midst. "There," David pointed to a busy shopping center with a parking lot full of vehicles and pedestrians. "Pull in there." Marshall guided the ATV into the parking lot, slowing to avoid drawing attention with excessive speed. They found a spot between 2 SUVs, offering some concealment from casual observation. "What now?" Marshall asked, cutting the engine. David scanned the shopping center, his mind racing through scenarios. "We need transportation and a way to contact Dr. Chen without being traced. And disguises," Emily added pragmatically. "We look suspicious." She wasn't wrong. Their clothes were still damp and mud-stained from their journey through the forest. Marshall's medical scrubs were torn in places, and David's uniform, though partially concealed by a jacket, would immediately identify him as law enforcement to any observer paying attention. The department store, David decided, indicating a large retail outlet at the center of the complex. "We can get fresh clothes, supplies, and probably use a store phone." They exited the ATV, trying to appear as normal as possible despite their disheveled state and the 2 infants they carried. David led them toward the store entrance, constantly scanning for threats. So far there was no sign of pursuit, but he knew better than to think they'd lost their trackers completely. Inside the store, the bright lights and cheerful music created a surreal contrast to the life-or-death situation they faced. Shoppers moved casually around them, focused on their own concerns, completely oblivious to the fact that they shared space with children at the center of a government conspiracy. Children's department first, David directed quietly. Emily needs fresh clothes and we should get things for the babies. As they moved through the store, David became increasingly aware of the strange looks they were receiving. A disheveled man in a partial police uniform carrying an infant, accompanied by a doctor in torn scrubs with another baby and a bedraggled young girl. They couldn't have attracted more attention if they'd tried. "We're too conspicuous," Marshall murmured. "We need to separate." "No," Emily said immediately, her voice sharp with fear. "We stay together. The babies need to stay together." David understood her concern, but their options were narrowing by the minute. "Emily, we won't go far from each other, but Dr. Marshall is right. We're drawing too much attention as a group." After some negotiation, they developed a plan. Marshall would take Adam to the men's department to find fresh clothes for himself and David. Emily would accompany David and Alice to the children's section. They would rendezvous in 30 minutes at the store's cafe, hopefully looking less like fugitives and more like ordinary shoppers. "Be careful," David told Marshall as they prepared to separate. "If you see anything suspicious, I'll find you immediately," Marshall assured him. David watched him walk away with Adam, an uneasy feeling settling in his stomach. Dividing their forces felt wrong, despite the tactical necessity. But they had little choice if they wanted to avoid immediate detection. "Come on," he said to Emily, leading her toward the children's department. "Let's find you some clean clothes." Emily remained unusually quiet as they browsed through racks of children's attire. She selected items mechanically, her attention seemingly elsewhere. "Are you okay?" David asked softly, adjusting Alice in his arms. Emily looked up at him, her blue eyes troubled. "Adam is getting further away," she said. "I can still feel him, but it's stretching." David glanced in the direction Marshall had gone, suddenly concerned. "Is he in danger?" Emily hesitated. "Not danger, not yet, but something's changing. The device is waiting." "Waiting for what?" "I don't know," she admitted. "But it feels important, like it's counting down to something." David checked his watch. They still had 20 minutes before their scheduled rendezvous with Marshall. "Let's hurry," he suggested, gathering the clothes Emily had selected. "We'll get these, find something for me to change into, and then meet up with them early." They proceeded to a self-checkout kiosk, David awkwardly scanning items while balancing Alice. He paid with cash from his emergency funds, grateful that his wallet had survived their ordeal thus far. "Let's find a restroom where you can change," he suggested to Emily after completing their purchase. "Then we'll find Dr. Marshall and Adam." They located a family restroom near the store's center, allowing Emily privacy to change while David waited, outside with Alice, constantly scanning their surroundings for threats. When Emily emerged in clean jeans and a simple sweatshirt, she looked more like an ordinary child and less like a fugitive, except for the haunted look in her eyes that no 8-year-old should possess. "Better?" David asked, offering an encouraging smile. Emily nodded, though her expression remained solemn. "We need to find Adam," she said urgently. "Now." Something in her tone sent a chill down David's spine. Without further questions, he led them toward the men's department where Marshall had gone. They moved quickly through the store, David's instincts now fully alert. The men's department was busy with shoppers, but there was no immediate sign of Marshall or Adam. David scanned the area methodically, looking for the doctor's distinctive silver hair among the customers. "I don't see them," he said, trying to keep the concern from his voice. Emily's hand suddenly clutched his arm, her fingers digging in with surprising strength. "He's there," she whispered, pointing toward a display of men's jackets. "But he's not alone." At first, David saw nothing unusual, just Marshall browsing through jackets with Adam in his arms, appearing perfectly ordinary. But as Marshall turned slightly, David noticed his posture, too rigid, his movements too controlled. And standing casually beside him, appearing to browse the same rack, was a man David didn't recognize. Average height, nondescript features, wearing a store employee badge, except his eyes were wrong. Even from this distance, David could see the flat, emotionless quality that marked him as one of them, an augment. "They found us," he whispered, instinctively drawing back behind a display. "They have Marshall and Adam." David's mind raced through scenarios, each one worse than the last. Dr. Marshall stood rigidly by the clothing rack. Adam clutched against his chest, while the disguised augment maintained a casual pose beside him. To any ordinary shopper, they might have appeared to be just another customer receiving assistance from store staff. But David recognized the subtle signs of coercion. Marshall's too straight posture, the slight tremor in his hands, the way his eyes darted anxiously across the store. "What do we do?" Emily whispered, her small hand still gripping David's arm. David carefully retreated behind a large display of winter coats, pulling Emily with him. Alice remained miraculously quiet in his arms, as if the infant somehow understood the need for stealth. "We need to create a distraction," David whispered, "something that will give us a chance to get Marshall and Adam away from that augment without endangering the civilians in the store." Emily's eyes suddenly widened. "There are more of them," she said softly. "I can feel them. 3. No, 4. They're spreading through the store, looking for us." David believed her without question. The child's mysterious connection to the augments had proven accurate too many times to doubt now. "Emily, I need you to be very brave," he said, crouching to her eye level. "I'm going to cause a distraction. When it happens, I want you to stay hidden right here with Alice. Don't move unless I come for you or you're in immediate danger. Can you do that?" Emily nodded solemnly, holding out her arms to take Alice. David carefully transferred the baby girl to her, making sure Emily had a secure hold before standing again. "What are you going to do?" Emily asked. David glanced around the store, forming a quick plan. Something unpredictable. He slipped away from their hiding spot, moving casually through the racks of clothing until he reached the store's electronics department. There, he located what he needed: a display of home security systems, complete with demonstration models. Working quickly, he triggered the alarm on one of the units, then moved to another section and did the same with a different model. Immediately, piercing alarm sounds filled the store from opposite directions. Shoppers looked up in confusion as a pre-recorded announcement began playing over the store's PA system. "Attention shoppers, please proceed calmly to the nearest exit. This is not a drill." The confusion was instant. Customers began moving toward the exits, some hurrying, others hesitating in confusion. Store employees rushed to investigate the alarms, adding to the chaos. David circled back toward the men's department, using the moving crowds as cover. Through gaps between shoppers, he could see Marshall and the augment. The disguised being had grabbed Marshall's arm, restraining him even as the doctor tried to move with the evacuating crowd. The augment's head was turning in mechanical precision, scanning methodically for threats or targets. David approached from behind, using a large man pushing a shopping cart as a shield. When he was within striking distance, he grabbed a heavy, metal garment rack and, with all his strength, shoved it directly into the augment's legs. The being stumbled, its inhuman reflexes momentarily overcome by the unexpected physical impact. In that split second, David lunged forward, grabbing Marshall's free arm. "Run!" he shouted, pulling the doctor away from the disoriented augment. Marshall didn't need to be told twice. With Adam clutched tightly against him, he followed David through the scattering crowd toward the display where Emily waited with Alice. The augment recovered with unnatural speed, its flat eyes locking onto them as they fled. It touched something at its wrist, communicating with the others, David realized with a sinking feeling. They reached Emily, who emerged from hiding with Alice. "There's an emergency exit through the stockroom," David told them, already guiding the group toward a door marked "Employees Only." "This way." They pushed through the swinging door into a storage area filled with boxes and merchandise on industrial shelving. A red exit sign glowed at the far end, promising escape. "We're not alone," Emily warned, her voice tight with fear. "They're coming from both sides." As if summoned by her words, a figure stepped from between two tall shelf units, blocking their path to the exit. It wore the uniform of a store security guard but moved with the telltale precision of an augment. Behind them, the door from the sales floor swung open as another augment entered. They were trapped. David pushed Emily behind him, his mind frantically searching for options. The stockroom had other exits, loading docks, perhaps another emergency. Doctor, but he didn't know the layout and the augments were closing in from multiple directions. David, Marshall said quietly, his voice strained but controlled. They want the babies alive. That's their primary directive. David understood immediately what Marshall was suggesting. The augments wouldn't risk harming Adam and Alice, which gave the adults a slim advantage. When I move, get the children to that exit, David said, not taking his eyes off the approaching augments. No matter what happens to me, get them to Dr. Chen. Before Marshall could protest, David charged directly at the augment, blocking their path to the exit. It was a desperate move, one that relied entirely on the being's programming to preserve the assets at all costs. The augment reacted precisely as David had hoped. Instead of engaging, it shifted to avoid potential damage to the infants, creating a momentary opening. Now, David shouted to Marshall and Emily, who sprinted for the exit with the babies. The augment recovered quickly, its hand shooting out to grab David's arm with crushing force. Pain exploded through his limb, but he saw Marshall hit the exit bar, the door swinging open to reveal the back parking lot beyond. The second augment was moving to intercept the fleeing group. David, despite the agonizing grip on his arm, managed to grab a fire extinguisher from a nearby wall mount. With his free arm, he discharged it directly into the face of the augment holding him. The chemical spray didn't harm the being, but it temporarily obscured its visual sensors. Its grip loosened just enough for David to wrench free, though the effort sent daggers of pain through what he suspected was now a fractured arm. He stumbled toward the exit, putting himself between the second augment and the escaping group. "Keep going," he shouted to Marshall, who had paused at the door. "Get them out of here." The augment reached for David, its movements precise despite the chaos. David dodged, using a shelving unit for cover, buying precious seconds for the others to escape. But his luck couldn't hold. The first augment had already cleared its sensors and was approaching from behind. David was out of options, his injured arm throbbing. His path to the exit now cut off by two augments with several more likely en route. This was it, the moment he'd buy with his freedom, perhaps his life, so the children could escape. He prepared for the inevitable capture, determined to resist long enough to give Marshall and Emily maximum head start. Then a deafening explosion ripped through the rear of the stockroom. The concrete wall near the loading dock erupted inward, sending debris and dust billowing through the space. The augments paused, their sensors trying to process this unexpected development. Through the newly created hole in the wall roared a familiar black SUV, its reinforced front bumper clearly designed for precisely this kind of barrier breach. The vehicle screeched to a halt between David and the augments. The driver's door flew open, and a voice David had thought he might never hear again shouted, "Get in, Harper, now!" Sarah Lawson, looking battered but very much alive, leaned across the seat, her service weapon trained on the nearest augment. David didn't hesitate. He dove into the passenger seat as Sarah fired 3 precise shots, not at the augments themselves, but at the support structure of a massive shelving unit beside them. The metal groaned, then collapsed, temporarily blocking the being's path. "The others?" Sarah demanded, already backing the SUV toward the exit. "Out the emergency door," David replied, gritting his teeth against the pain in his arm. "Parking lot." Sarah spun the wheel, sending the vehicle in a tight arc toward the exit where Marshall and Emily had fled. They found the group huddled behind a dumpster, Marshall looking shell-shocked, Emily clutching both babies with remarkable composure for a child her age. "Get in," Sarah ordered, throwing open the rear doors. They piled in, Marshall helping Emily with the babies before scrambling in himself. Sarah floored the accelerator before the doors were fully closed, sending the SUV lurching toward the shopping center exit. "How?" David began, still trying to process Sarah's miraculous appearance. Later, she cut him off, her eyes constantly checking the mirrors as she navigated through traffic with controlled urgency. Right now, we need distance. Those things will be after us within minutes, and they'll have air support soon. We need to get to Palo Alto, Marshall said from the back seat. To Dr. Chen's research facility. I know, Sarah replied grimly. Dr. Abernathy managed to get me a message before. She didn't finish the sentence, but David understood. Before Eleanor had made her final stand. You have a plan? He asked, cradling his injured arm. Half of one, Sarah admitted, taking a sharp turn onto a side street to avoid the main thoroughfare. We ditch this vehicle soon. It's how I tracked you, which means they can too. Then we split up, use different routes to Palo Alto. No, Emily's voice was firm despite its childish pitch. The babies stay together, I stay with them. Sarah glanced in the rearview mirror, taking in the determined face of the young girl. Understood. But we need to be smarter about this. They're tracking Adam's implant somehow, even with the stabilizer Dr. Abernathy administered. It's cycling, Emily said. Active, then dormant. That's why they keep finding us, then losing us again. Sarah processed this information with a quick nod. Then we use that. Next time it goes dormant, we switch vehicles, change direction, try to break their tracking pattern. How did you find us? David asked, still struggling to believe Sarah had survived the forest encounter. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. Those augments are efficient, but not particularly creative. I led them on a chase, then doubled back. Found your delivery driver friend, Mike. He'd seen the helicopter pursuing you toward the train tracks. After that, it was just a matter of following the most logical route. Mike's alive? David felt a surge of relief. Sarah nodded. Banged up, but alive. He's actually the one who helped me acquire this vehicle. She didn't elaborate on what that might have entailed, and David didn't ask. Your arm needs attention, Marshall observed, leaning forward to examine David's injury. It'll keep, David replied, though the pain was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. How far to Palo Alto? About 30 minutes in normal traffic, Sarah answered. But we're not taking a direct route, and we need to switch vehicles first. She navigated through residential streets, deliberately avoiding main roads where surveillance cameras might be more prevalent. There's something else, Emily said suddenly, her voice small but urgent. Adam's device. It's changing again. Getting ready. Marshall immediately checked the baby boy, who appeared peaceful in Emily's arms beside his sister. His vitals are still stable. No fever, normal heart rate. Not his body, Emily insisted. The thing inside him. It's waking up, all the way this time. Sarah and David exchanged concerned glances. Waking up to do what? Sarah asked. Emily shook her head. I don't know exactly, but it's important. It's what they've been waiting for. David thought back to everything they'd learned. Neural implants, government experiments, children used as test subjects for technology that transformed soldiers into something no longer fully human. The next phase, he murmured, remembering Emily's earlier words. Whatever they put inside Adam, it's not just a tracking device, it's something more. All the more reason to get to Dr. Chen as quickly as possible, Sarah said, her expression hardening with renewed determination. She's our best hope of understanding what we're dealing with and removing it safely. They approached a busy shopping district. The streets filled with afternoon traffic and pedestrians going about their normal lives, oblivious to the life-or-death drama unfolding in their midst. There, Sarah indicated a public parking garage. We'll abandon this vehicle and find alternative transportation. She pulled into the garage, driving to the uppermost level where fewer cars were parked. After finding a spot in a secluded corner, she cut the engine and turned to face the group. Everyone out. Leave everything that could be tracked. She opened her door, then paused, her training and experience asserting itself. Harper, with me. Dr. Marshall, stay with Emily and the babies until we secure new transportation. David followed. Sarah, despite the pain in his arm, understanding that two adults moving through the garage would attract less attention than their entire unusual group. What exactly are we looking for? He asked as they descended the garage stairwell. Something inconspicuous, Sarah replied. Family vehicle, preferably. Large enough for all of us. Common enough not to stand out. They emerged on the second level, where more cars were parked. Sarah moved with purpose, scanning the vehicles with a professional eye. There, she said finally, indicating a slightly worn minivan with family stickers on the rear window. Perfect blend of anonymity and space. And how exactly are we acquiring this vehicle? David asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. Sarah gave him a level look. Do you want the official FBI agent answer, or the truth? Never mind, David sighed. Just do what you need to do. With surprising efficiency, Sarah approached the minivan, produced what appeared to be a specialized electronic device from her pocket, and within moments had the door open without triggering any alarm. She slipped inside, and seconds later the engine hummed to life. Go get the others, she instructed, sliding into the driver's seat. I'll bring it around to the upper level. David returned to their abandoned SUV, where Marshall was anxiously waiting with Emily and the babies. We've got transportation, he told them. Sarah's bringing it up now. Marshall helped gather Emily and the twins, carefully transferring them from one vehicle to another when Sarah arrived with the minivan. Within minutes, they were driving out of the parking garage, now disguised as an ordinary family in an unremarkable vehicle. Head for the back roads, David suggested as they approached the exit. Less surveillance, less chance of roadblocks. Sarah nodded, already plotting a route in her mind. It'll take longer, but you're right. Safety over speed at this point. As they navigated through the suburban streets, gradually making their way toward Palo Alto, David allowed himself a moment to assess their situation. They had the children, they had transportation, and they had a destination with potential answers. Against all odds, they'd survived encounters that should have been fatal. But the hard truth remained. They were civilian fugitives facing the resources of what appeared to be a covert government operation with technology beyond conventional understanding. Their pursuers didn't tire, didn't hesitate, and apparently didn't stop until their mission was complete. And at the center of it all was Adam, a 3-month-old baby with something inside him that everyone was willing to kill for, or die protecting. In the back seat, Emily sat between the infant carriers, her small hands resting on both babies. Her eyes were closed, her face a mask of concentration. Emily, Marshall asked gently, what is it? She opened her eyes slowly, looking first at Adam, then at Alice, before raising her gaze to meet the adults' concerned expressions. It's starting, she said simply. The countdown has begun. Sarah navigated the minivan through increasingly remote back roads, the suburban landscape gradually giving way to the wooded foothills surrounding Palo Alto. Light filtered through, the trees in dappled patterns creating an almost peaceful atmosphere that stood in stark contrast to the tension inside the vehicle. How much further? David asked, cradling his injured arm. The pain had settled into a persistent throb, but he'd pushed it to the back of his mind, focusing instead on their immediate survival. 10 minutes if we stay on this route, Sarah replied, her eyes constantly checking the mirrors for signs of pursuit. Dr. Chen's facility is nestled in the hills above Stanford University, deliberately isolated. In the back seat, Emily sat perfectly still between the twins, her expression one of intense concentration. Since announcing the mysterious countdown, she had fallen into an almost trance-like state, responding only minimally when spoken to directly. Dr. Marshall leaned forward, his voice low with concern. Agent Lawson, what exactly do we know about this Dr. Chen? Can we truly trust her? Eleanor Abernathy trusted her, Sarah answered simply. That's enough for me. And if she's been compromised? Marshall pressed. If they reached her before we did? Sarah's grip tightened on the steering wheel. Then we'll deal with that when we arrive. But right now she's our only hope of understanding what's inside Adam and removing it safely. David's thoughts drifted to Eleanor, to her sacrifice that had bought them precious time. To Mike, who had risked everything to help strangers in need. To the countless unnamed others who must have been harmed by whatever organization was behind these experiments. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him, not just for Emily and the twins, but for ensuring that these sacrifices weren't in vain. 4 minutes, Emily suddenly announced, her voice startling in the quiet vehicle. All eyes turned to her, but her gaze remained fixed on Adam. 4 minutes until what, Emily? David asked gently. Until it fully activates, she replied, her small fingers lightly brushing against Adam's chest. I can feel it building like water behind a dam. Marshall immediately checked Adam's vitals with what remained of their portable medical equipment. Heart rate increasing, but still within normal parameters. Temperature normal. Respiration slightly elevated. Is he in danger? Sarah asked, accelerating slightly despite the winding road. Emily shook her head. Not him. He's just the carrier, when it activates. She trailed off, her expression troubled. When it activates, what happens? David prompted. Emily looked up, her eyes meeting his with an unsettling directness. It calls them, all of them. Not just the ones chasing us, but others. Many others. A chill ran down David's spine at the implication. How many others are there, Emily? I don't know, she admitted. But more than we've seen. Much more. Sarah took a sharp turn onto an unmarked road that climbed steeply into the hills. We're almost there. 2 minutes. Maybe less. They fell into tense silence, each processing Emily's warning in their own way. The road narrowed further, eventually becoming little more than a paved trail winding through dense trees. Then, rounding a final bend, they saw it. A sleek modern building nestled into the hillside. Its glass and steel structure designed to blend with the natural surroundings rather than dominate them. Chen Neuroscience, Sarah confirmed, approaching a security gate with a sophisticated intercom system. She rolled down the window and pressed the call button. A moment passed before a woman's voice responded. This facility is private. Please, state your business. I need to speak with Dr. Maya Chen, Sarah replied firmly. Tell her it's regarding Eleanor Abernathy and a Blackbird scenario. The intercom went silent. 10 seconds passed, then 20. Finally, the voice returned, noticeably, more cautious. Proceed to the main entrance. Park in the designated visitor area only. The gate slid open soundlessly, allowing them access to a curved driveway leading to the building's entrance. Sarah parked exactly where instructed, cutting the engine with a weary sigh. Remember, she said, turning to face the others, we trust no one completely. Not until we're certain they're not compromised. They exited the vehicle carefully, Marshall taking Adam while David, despite his injured arm, insisted on carrying Alice. Emily stayed close between them, her small face tense with anticipation. The glass doors of the facility opened as they approached, revealing a striking woman in her early 50s. Her black hair streaked with silver and pulled back in a severe bun. She wore a simple lab coat over business attire, her expression wary but composed. I'm Dr. Maya Chen, she introduced herself, her eyes moving clinically over the group before settling on the infants. Eleanor contacted me yesterday. She said you might be coming. A shadow passed over her face. She also said if you arrived without her, I should assume the worst. Sarah stepped forward. Dr. Abernathy gave her life to help us escape. These children are in danger from people with government connections. The baby boy has some kind of device surgically implanted inside him. Chen's expression hardened. Come, inside. Quickly. They followed her through a minimalist lobby to a secure elevator requiring both a key card and biometric scan for access. As the doors closed behind them, Emily suddenly grabbed David's arm. 2 minutes, she whispered urgently. The elevator descended smoothly, bypassing the main floors of the facility and continuing deeper underground. When the doors opened, they revealed a space unlike the modern aesthetic above, a reinforced medical suite with equipment that appeared both cutting-edge and somehow experimental. My private research laboratory, Dr. Chen explained, leading them to a central examination area. Electromagnetically shielded, off the grid, and unknown to my board of directors or government oversight committees. You were expecting trouble, Sarah observed. Chen's lips thinned. Eleanor and I have had contingency plans in place for years. We both left government service when we realized where the research was heading, but we never stopped watching or preparing. She turned her attention to Adam, gesturing for Marshall to place him on a specialized examination table. "This is the one with the implant?" Marshall nodded, reluctantly relinquishing his hold on the baby. "His twin sister seems to have some kind of connection to him. And Emily here." He hesitated, uncertain how to explain the child's mysterious abilities. "I understand more than you might think, Doctor," Chen said, already running sophisticated, scanning equipment over Adam's small body. Eleanor's message was brief but specific. The scanner produced a three-dimensional holographic image of Adam's internal organs, with the device clearly visible as a foreign object near his liver. Chen manipulated the image with practiced gestures, zooming in on the implant. "Fascinating," she murmured. "I've never seen integration this advanced, especially in an infant subject." "Can you remove it?" David asked, the urgency in his voice reflecting Emily's countdown warning. Chen studied the scans with clinical detachment. "Not easily. The device has extended microscopic filaments throughout his nervous system. Removing it carelessly would cause catastrophic damage." She looked up sharply. "But first I need to understand what it does." "It's a beacon," Emily said matter-of-factly, "and it's about to activate fully." Chen's attention shifted to the girl, reassessing her with new interest. "You're a receiver," she stated rather than asked. "First generation?" Emily nodded. "They called me a prototype." "1 minute," she added, her voice tight with tension. Chen moved with sudden urgency, activating additional equipment around the room. "If this device is what I think it is, we need to contain the signal when it activates." She turned to Sarah. "Help me deploy the Faraday shields, all of them." Sarah followed Chen's instructions, helping to engage a series of mechanisms that caused metal shutters to slide into place over the walls, ceiling, and floor, effectively turning the room into a sealed electromagnetic cage. "Will this stop the signal?" David asked, instinctively holding Alice closer. "Not stop it," Chen replied, still working rapidly at her control panel, "but hopefully contain it long enough for me to analyze it and develop a countermeasure." The final shields locked into place with a resonant clang, isolating them completely from the outside world. Chen returned to Adam, attaching specialized, monitoring equipment to his tiny body with gentle efficiency. 30 seconds, Emily whispered, her eyes now closed as if listening to an inaudible countdown. The tension in the room was palpable as they watched Chen work, her fingers flying over complex interfaces while constantly checking Adam's vital signs. Marshall hovered nearby, his medical training making him a concerned observer to procedures he only partially understood. 10 seconds, Emily announced. Chen stepped back from the examination table, her face grim with concentration. "Everyone, stay completely still. Whatever happens, don't touch any of the equipment or the children until I say it's safe. 5, 4, 3. Emily counted down, her voice barely audible. David held his breath, his arm tightening protectively around Alice. 2, 1. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Adam lay peacefully on the examination table, his small chest rising and falling with normal infant breaths. The monitoring equipment continued its steady beeping, showing no alarming changes. Then, without warning, all the screens in the laboratory flickered simultaneously. The lights dimmed, then brightened to an almost painful intensity before stabilizing again. A high-pitched tone, just at the edge of human hearing, filled the room, making them wince in discomfort. On the main display above Adam, a stream of complex data began flowing, too fast for human eyes to track the individual components. Chen stared at it in fascination and horror, her fingers frozen above her keyboard. "What is it?" Sarah demanded, her hand instinctively moving toward her weapon. Chen's voice, when she finally spoke, was barely above a whisper. "It's a transmission, but not just any transmission." She turned to face them, her expression grave with the weight of realization. "It's an activation sequence for all of them." The laboratory hummed with an otherworldly energy as Adam's implant continued its transmission. Dr. Chen worked frantically at her console, fingers flying across holographic interfaces as she attempted to decode the signal while keeping it contained. Within their electromagnetic shields, all of them? David repeated, his mind struggling to grasp the implications. You mean all the augments? Chen nodded grimly. This isn't just a tracking beacon, it's a command and control node. She manipulated a three-dimensional representation of the signal pattern hovering above her workstation. The technology we're seeing here is beyond anything that should exist. Emily stood perfectly still beside Adam, her eyes closed, her small face contorted with concentration. They're answering, she whispered. I can feel them. Hundreds of them. Sarah moved to the security monitors, checking the perimeter of the facility. How long before they converge on our location? That depends on how effective our shielding is, Chen replied, not looking up from her work. If even a fraction of the signal is leaking through. She didn't need to finish the thought. They all understood the gravity of their situation. Marshall hovered anxiously near Adam, monitoring the infant's vital signs. His neural activity is off the charts, but physically he seems stable. It's as if the device is using him as a conduit, rather than affecting him directly. That's precisely what it's doing, Chen confirmed. The integration is extraordinarily sophisticated. It's using his developing neural pathways as biological processors, supplementing its own capabilities. David looked down at Alice, still cradled in his arms. The baby girl was awake but eerily calm, her eyes fixed on her twin brother across the room. And what's Alice's role in all this? Chen hesitated. Based on what I'm seeing, she appears to be a regulator, a counterbalance. The male twin carries the primary technology, but the female provides stability and perhaps additional processing capability. They're complementary systems, Emily added, her voice distant, as if she were translating concepts she didn't fully understand. Adam transmits, Alice receives, like me, but better. A sudden alarm blared from Chen's console. She cursed under her breath, fingers racing to suppress whatever had triggered the warning. What is it? Sarah demanded, moving swiftly to her side. The signal's changing, Chen replied tensely. Evolving. It's attempting to penetrate our shields through frequency modulation. David felt a chill run through him. It's intelligent? Not the signal itself, Chen clarified, but whatever's controlling it from the other end. Yes, I believe it is. The laboratory lights flickered again, as the system strained against the power demands of maintaining their electromagnetic barrier. Chen's expression grew increasingly concerned, as she worked to reinforce the shields. I need to extract the core command algorithms from this transmission, she explained, her voice tightly controlled despite the urgency. If I can isolate the primary directives, we might be able to develop a countermeasure. How long? Sarah pressed. Minutes, maybe, if we're lucky. Chen glanced up briefly. And if the shields hold? Another alarm joined the first, this one accompanied by flashing red lights around the laboratory's perimeter. Perimeter breach, Chen announced grimly. Upper-level security has been compromised. Sarah drew her weapon, checking the ammunition. They're here. David moved instinctively to position himself between the door and the children. Even with his injured arm, he would be the next line of defense if Sarah fell. Dr. Chen, he said. Urgently, we're out of time. Can you remove that device from Adam now? Chen shook her head, not pausing in her work. Not without killing him. The integration is too complete. Her eyes narrowed in concentration. But I might have another option. She activated a secondary console, bringing up what appeared to be schematics for a device unlike anything David had seen before. Eleanor and I developed this as a contingency, Chen explained rapidly. A neural dampening field, designed to temporarily suppress command signals to augmented soldiers if they ever went rogue. Will it stop the transmission? Marshall asked. I don't know, Chen admitted. This technology is considerably more advanced than what we designed the dampener to counteract, but it might buy us time. The security monitors showed dark figures moving with mechanical precision through the upper levels of the facility. Their movements were coordinated, methodical, clearing each room systematically as they descended toward the laboratory. 2 minutes, maybe less, before they reach us, Sarah warned, positioning herself at the laboratory's reinforced door. Chen worked with feverish intensity, her hands moving between consoles as she simultaneously analyzed the signal and prepared her experimental countermeasure. "I need 30 seconds, she announced. "Just 30 seconds. Emily suddenly stepped forward, placing herself beside Adam. "I can help," she said with quiet determination. "I can slow it down." Before anyone could stop her, she placed her small hands on either side of Adam's head and closed her eyes in intense concentration. The stream of data on the main display immediately became erratic, the patterns breaking up and reforming as if encountering interference. "She's disrupting the transmission," Chen observed with astonishment. "Somehow she's introducing noise into the signal." David watched in amazement as Emily stood rigid with effort, her face pale but determined as she created whatever mental interference she could muster. On the security monitors, the advancing augments paused momentarily, as if confused by the sudden change in their guidance system. "It's working," Sarah confirmed, "but I don't know for how long." Chen's hands flew across her controls, taking advantage of the precious seconds Emily's intervention had provided. With a final sequence of commands, she activated the dampening device, a circular array of emitters surrounding the examination table where Adam lay. The laboratory hummed with new energy as the dampening field engaged, creating a visible distortion in the air around Adam. The data stream on the monitors stuttered, then stabilized at a much reduced intensity. "Got it," Chen announced, relief evident in her voice. "I've established a containment field around the primary transmission. It won't last forever, but it should give us time to evacuate." Emily stumbled back, exhausted from her mental exertion. David caught her with his good arm, steadying her. "You did it," he told her softly. "You bought us the time we needed." The girl nodded weakly, her eyes already turning back to the twins. "But they're still coming," she whispered. "And now they're angry." "We need to move now," Sarah ordered, checking the security feeds one last time. The augments had resumed their advance, moving with renewed purpose through the facility's upper levels. Dr. Chen disconnected Adam from the monitoring equipment while maintaining the portable dampening field. "There's an evacuation tunnel," she explained, activating a hidden panel in the laboratory wall. "It leads to a secondary facility 2 miles north. Transport is waiting." David gathered Alice while Marshall helped the exhausted Emily to her feet. The wall panel slid open to reveal a narrow passageway illuminated by emergency lighting. "The dampening field will hold for approximately 20 minutes, Chen warned as they entered the tunnel. "After that, the transmission will resume at full strength." The passage sloped downward, carved directly through the hillside. Their footsteps echoed against the stone walls as they moved as quickly as the children's safety would allow. Behind them, a muffled explosion signaled the augments' breach of the laboratory. The race against time had become literal, 20 minutes to reach safety before Adam's device reactivated and broadcast their location to every augment in the region. "What's at this secondary facility?" David asked as they hurried through. "The tunnel." "Something that might give us a fighting chance," Chen replied cryptically. "Eleanor's final project, the one the government never knew about." Sarah, leading their group with weapon drawn, paused at a junction. "Which way?" "Left," Chen directed. "We're almost there." Emily suddenly clutched David's sleeve. "They've found the tunnel," she whispered. "They're coming." The tunnel widened into a cavernous underground chamber housing a sophisticated research facility. Unlike Chen's primary lab, this space contained equipment that appeared almost experimental, technology that seemed to push the boundaries of what should be possible. "Eleanor's sanctuary," Chen explained, as she led them toward a central platform, where we continued our work away from government oversight. At the chamber's center stood a device unlike anything David had ever seen, a circular array of emitters surrounding what appeared to be a medical examination pod. "What is it?" Sarah asked, positioning herself to guard the tunnel entrance. "A neural recalibration system," Chen replied, already preparing the equipment, designed to safely disentangle augmented neural pathways without causing permanent damage. Marshall looked skeptical. "You're saying this can remove Adam's implant?" "Not exactly remove it," Chen clarified. but potentially deactivate it and sever its external communications capabilities. Emily approached the device cautiously. It was made for people like me, she said with quiet certainty, to undo what they did to us. Chen nodded solemnly. Eleanor never stopped trying to right the wrongs we participated in. A distant rumble echoed through the tunnel, the augments drawing closer. How long will the procedure take? David asked. Urgently. Chen's expression tightened. Longer than we have. Sarah checked her ammunition. Then I'll buy you that time. The final confrontation unfolded with terrifying speed. Sarah positioned herself at the tunnel entrance, her determination unwavering as the first augments appeared. Her precise shots targeted structural weaknesses, bringing down sections of the tunnel to delay their advance. Meanwhile, Chen worked with methodical urgency, preparing Adam for the procedure while explaining instructions to Marshall, ensuring someone else could complete the process if she fell. David stood guard with Emily and Alice, his injured arm forgotten in the rush of adrenaline. This has to work, he whispered. As the neural recalibration system hummed to life, Adam's small body was enveloped in a gentle blue glow. The monitors displayed his neural pathways, showing the implant's invasive tendrils throughout his developing brain. The integration is deeper than I expected, Chen warned. This will be delicate. The chamber shook as multiple explosions rocked the tunnel. Sarah retreated to their position, her expression grim. They're using breaching charges. We have minutes, maybe seconds. The procedure reached its critical phase just as the first augments broke through the final barrier. Time seemed to slow as Sarah and David prepared for their last stand, protecting the children with everything they had left. Then something unexpected happened. Adam's implant emitted a pulse of energy unlike anything before. The advancing augments suddenly froze, their synchronization disrupted. It's working, Chen exclaimed. The recalibration is cascading through the network. The augments collapsed simultaneously, their neural implants deactivated by the same signal that had once controlled them. Adam's device, now reprogrammed, had become the key to their freedom. As the blue light faded, Adam cooed softly, finally free from the burden he'd carried since birth. In that moment of quiet triumph, David understood that their journey wasn't ending, it was just beginning. These children, so fought over and experimented upon, would need protection for years to come. But they would have it, he silently vowed. They would have the childhood that had been stolen from them, and the government program that had created them would be exposed to the light of day. Emily looked up at David, her eyes reflecting wisdom beyond her years. It's over, she said simply. We're free. And in that moment, surrounded by fallen augments and the technology that had nearly destroyed them all, David Harper finally allowed himself to believe she might be right.